Welcome to a Champion's Journey podcast. I'm Matt Davidson. From an early age, I've had the privilege of learning from world champions and world-class performers, and I've always been fascinated by what drives them to the pinnacle of achievement. In this podcast, I'll interview high performers to learn more about the habits, rituals, tactics, and strategies which have aided them throughout the course of their journeys so that we can take those lessons and apply them to ours. The mission of a Champion's Journey podcast is to interview not only those who have stood on the top podium in arenas of high-level competition, but to learn from those who have conquered life's greatest challenges and have dared to live life on their own terms. All right, Steve, welcome to the podcast. I really appreciate you being here. It's been a while. We've been trying to make this happen for a while, so I'm glad we're finally able to do it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, no worries. How did you find out about skydiving, and what was your initial experience like?
How did I find out about, okay, so like my very, very first sort of exposure to skydiving, I remember at MIT walking through the hallway and there was like a events fair, let's say, and there was this poster up and it said, if at first you don't succeed, skydiving is not for you. You know, and it said MIT Skydiving Club, you know, and it was a cute little thing, but I remember saying to myself, well, I'm not good at anything the first time. Skydiving is definitely not for me. And I had no interest. And I remember sort of not, never. I remember friends of mine doing tandems and another kid that was in ROTC and he got to do some skydives in ROTC. I think they're static line, but always being like, nope. And Jeanette started skydiving. She did because her uncle, well, not maybe because, but anyway, she that played a role, but she loved it immediately. And when she did, that's how I kind of like understood that this was a thing, but I still didn't have interest. And she did a tandem and then decided she wanted to get her license. And I remember thinking and saying, well, as long as you're going to do this, and I don't want to be behind you, so I'll just do that course with you. So if, you continue and I'll continue with you just to be around, but it wasn't because I wanted to. So I did this for the course and did that first jump. And honestly, I did not feel like I did a very good job. I remember I landed. And one thing that really stuck with me is that the instructor, the first thing he said when he saw me is like, your face is all snotty, clean the snot off your face. And I remember doing that, like touching my face. And it was disgusting, and then I remember the debrief and he was like, tell me about what happened. So I don't remember, it was all blur. So I just talked through the dive flow and he was like, well, no, it wasn't anything like that. You didn't really give account. You just kind of left, and you kicked and flailed. And then you sort of like, then you kind of calmed down and it was better and you pulled for yourself and, but it was like that,
Right, that sensory overload that it makes it hard to remember exactly what happened when it's your first time.
Yeah. And it didn't feel like I didn't have someone being like, but great job, It was sort of like, no, you didn't really do anything like I told you to.
No,
it was more the sense I had, Okay. And then at the same time, Jeanette, it comes out and her instructors are like, this is the best I've ever seen. You could be teaching me. I mean, you're ready to graduate. And I think, maybe even a little bit of ego there. It's sort of like, this is not for me. I wasn't that interested in the first place. I'm clearly not that good at it. I don't need to continue. So Jeanette kept jumping for about 3 years before I ever did another jump. And the only reason I did was because she won some tunnel time through her local skydiving league competition. Back then in Orlando, you only could get like full half-hour blocks. You didn't get like 15 out of a half hour. So if you had time and you weren't going to fly it straight, then it was just going to go. So you try to find people, to just fluff, right?
Yeah.
And so I went with Jeanette and they were just like, Steve, just get in there because the wind is just going and you understand like people go nuts to have this for free and here's your opportunity. And I remember being very reluctant, but I did it. And that I appreciated it. I was no longer, I wasn't scared, right? I'm in a wind tunnel and I listened to the instructor and he gave me a couple tips about how to fly myself. And pretty quick, I was able to just be stable and go up and down. And then like remember like maybe an hour later, they were like, hey, there's more time. And that time I was like, yeah, I'll do it, and then an hour later it was like, is there any more time available? And I remember getting out and looking at Jeanette in the antechamber and saying, I want to get my license. And she just was like, what? And I said, yeah, this is so much cooler than I knew. And she said, okay, and so that 3 years later, I was excited about it, got my license. And then from then on, it was like all I could do, every moment. That's pretty soon I was skipping out on work,
Well, that's awesome. Did you meet Jeanette while you're at MIT or was it before?
I met Jeanette at MIT. Neither of us were skydiving then, right? We graduated in 2000. I think that first jump was maybe 2001, if I remember correctly, or maybe it was 2003, something like that. Yeah. And so I knew her and that's what, I was attached to it at all.
Cool. I'd like to talk about your relationship with fear, because you mentioned that, maybe that played a factor in why, you weren't interested, or maybe what was holding you back a little bit at first. Were well, obviously you were scared or nervous to make your first jump, but how did you deal with those emotions when you started back jumping?
Yeah. I honestly, I don't think it was so much about fear. The first time when I didn't enjoy it as much, I think it was, for sure, of course I was afraid, as one would naturally be, but I think it was more about not doing it for the right reason. I wasn't doing it because I was very excited to do it. And then not feeling like I did a good job when I did. And I think those two things, like if I'm not particularly excited to do it, and I also don't think I'm good at it, then why am I here?
Right.
But as far as your question about fear and dealing with it, I remember one thing that was like a kind of a trick that I would play for myself. And I've done this like even in like a very, very scary water slide, or if it's a bungee jumping or something, I will tell myself that I've made the decision, way earlier. And it's that point at which I'm no longer, there's no return. So in other words, in a skydive, I would say to myself, when I manifest myself, I'm committed. That's it. Everything from then on is just a step towards jumping out of the plane, but it's not in the plane where I'm scared and thinking, like maybe I shouldn't do this or what am I, it's, I'm going to decide to do it or not at the moment I put myself on the load. And then from there on, it's a foregone conclusion.
Right. Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. It's like you've collected all the information or all the data up to that point. So when you actually get there on the precipice, you're not going to let whatever emotions are, telling you, hey, this is unnatural. Maybe I shouldn't do this at the time, to keep you from doing it. That's a good way to approach it.
Yeah, it worked for me, and I did the same thing, let's say with a bungee jump, like the moment I pay for that bungee jump, that's it, and everything else, every step towards the cliff is just, one more step that I'd already decided,
Right. Do you have any physiological things that you do, like breathing techniques or anything like that to get your, heart rate down?
Definitely. Yeah. Breathing for sure. Like, we talk a lot about, slow and comfortable breathing, smiling, like actively and a posture that is good, scanning myself for tenseness and trying to kind of release that, especially in the shoulders.
Yeah.
And then positive talks, and skydiving has helped with that with other things, it's like, oh, well, I skydive, so I can do this.
Right.
For a lot of people, I think, it's a cliche, but people say that they're more afraid of public speaking than, death. Right. I mean, literally.
Right.
And there's been so many times like at work, when I was still working, where I had to give a big presentation that was really important. And I would tell myself, you jump out of airplanes, you could do this, so the positive self-talk,
Yeah. Yeah. I'm the same way when it comes to public speaking, I get nervous, or even, before we start a podcast, I get, a little bit nervous and have to remind myself of those kind of things. And it definitely, skydiving has lots of crossover applications for things like that, psychologically, I think. And it's
for
really
sure.
Cool. Who are some of your early mentors, and how did they make a difference in your development?
One of my earliest was Cromie, Robert Cromie.
Yeah.
He was our coach Jeanette and I, when we were on two different teams, he coached both the teams. And then when we formed Rhythm, he was our player coach. So he was like one of the first teammates of Rhythm.
Nice.
Yeah. And the thing that really stuck out about him that really, I think, contributed to our kind of, concept of the team for forever after that was an idea of like, I think just of toughness, of sort of things are going to go wrong. Sometimes it's going to be hard. Sometimes you're not going to get things the way you expect. Doesn't matter. If you want it and you want to keep working, then you're going to just find a way to get around that, And he was so tough like that. And he was always had this attitude, I think we might have I don't know. I feel like maybe we broke his ankle one time. Maybe it wasn't a broken ankle, but we hurt him, especially as an inside center on a new team. Like there's a lot of times when you jam him into the door, he would come down and he'd be limping. And let's go. We're going again. Cause that was our plan, he was so tough and we loved that about him. And that was something that we wanted to be a part of who we were, So Chromie, also Kirk, we were with Kirk a lot early on, and later on too, but Kirk has always been a big influence. And man, so many others too, but I think about Sally and Shannon were two people that we worked with a bunch. Thomas Hughes early on. I'm sure I'm forgetting people, but those were a lot of the people that we worked with the closest, especially earliest.
Nice. Yeah, those are all great people, and when you're involved with those kind of people, it's easy to see how you made progressions not only in your personal skydiving development, but also together as a team. And I'd like to get back and talk about that later. I'd like to talk some about your transition and how you made the decision to completely shift focus from a steady and lucrative career to the uncertainty of pursuing your passion and following your dreams of becoming a full-time four-way formation skydiving competitor. Must have taken a tremendous amount of courage for you to make that move. What motivated you to take such a big step, and what was that experience like?
Yeah. Well, so Jeanette and I were working at the same company at the time. It was like an IT consulting company. And we were on Rhythm at that point. I think maybe we were doing sort of 18, 19, 20 average. And we were taking every moment that we could take away from work to train, so every weekend, but then also like every amount of time off and even sort of unpaid time off, to the point where we recognized that if we were going to get better, we needed to train more. And it meant leaving our jobs, that we couldn't, that we stretched the limit of what work would permit. But prior to that, and before I started skydiving, we were very excited about sailing. We wanted to learn more about sailing and possibly take like 6 months off to go around, not the world, but like the Caribbean. And just like everything else, we're very organized planners. So we figured out what we would need to do. We were taking sailing lessons, we were going, not like we were just going to cut one day and like, get a boat and see what happened. We were going to be fully prepared, Well, we were doing that. And as we did that, we were saving up as well. So we were kind of ready to take, an extended amount of time off work. And then we got into skydiving, or then more specifically, I did. When I did, we were both skydiving way more. And we were doing these sailing lessons. And I remember specifically saying, Jeanette, we were talking about skydiving on the sailboat, in the middle of our sailing lessons all the time. And I said, Jeanette, whenever we're here sailing, we're always talking about skydiving. And then whenever we're out skydiving, we're never talking about sailing, and maybe that's a clue that we should shift directions. And she was like, yeah, you're absolutely right. And so it wasn't at that moment that we decided to quit and become full-time skydivers, but it just meant that we were already of a mindset where we could possibly leave work for an extended period of time for something we were passionate about. And then sort of, a couple years go by, we get to that point in skydiving. And so it wasn't that hard to say, oh, well, this is the sailing trip we never did.
Okay.
Now it's just a couple years later and we're just doing this kind of, and maybe it is just a year, and maybe it turns out that it's not for us, but we can do this, and I think our mindset was that, we could do it for sailing, we could do it for this.
Right. Yeah. It was just a different area of focus, but you already had the structure of the plan that you had to support those goals and dreams economically and, time wise. And and already making the decision that like, we could accept ourselves leaving, because the biggest obstacle, or one of the biggest obstacles, just saying like, is this, like people don't leave work, like in other words, especially for myself, I don't know, not everyone's like this, right? But like I went to school and I was a good student and I knew I would go to college. And then I went to college and I did pretty well there. And I was like, I knew I would get a good job. I got a good job. And now it's like, the next thing would be to work your way up at that company to higher and higher responsibility. So like everything felt like a pretty laid out path. Right. It seems to be the status quo and what a lot of average people follow.
Yeah. So I think the biggest obstacle was making that decision to like pop off that. And one was saying to ourselves, okay, well, could we do it financially and like logistically? We figure that part out. And then the other was a lot of Jeanette sort of saying like, well, the thing that she would say, I remember was like, well, why can't we do this? Like why not? And when you ask why not, a lot of times, there's not a good answer.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. What's holding you back? Is it something, just a story that you're telling yourself mentally? Or,
yeah.
Well, that's cool. It's great to have a partner like that. That'll, Jen's the same way for me, is where she'll, if I tell myself certain stories like that, she'll, hey, maybe consider this from a different angle.
Yeah. She's
really
tremendous.
Cool.
I mean, Jeanette, this is so little of all the amazing things that I've gotten to do would have happened without Jeanette. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah, it's the same way with myself and Jen, like especially the travel, or when opportunities come up. That's one of the biggest things that I learned from her. I thought I was a person that sees opportunities, but she's like, something pops up and, I would maybe think about it a little longer, or, maybe tell someone, maybe let me think about that and see what I can, Jen's like, yes, we're doing it right now, you know, and it's there's a lot to be said for that type of mentality as far as seizing opportunities. Were people in your life, such as family, we talked about Jeanette, obviously, but other family, friends, and mentors supportive of your decision to make such a big life change, or did you experience some resistance?
Yeah, actually, I was a little surprised that I did have such support. I think one thing is also, I think my relationship with my parents has always been sort of, they know that once I've made up my mind, they're not going to change it, so they can get on the wagon with me or not, you know what I mean? But that's, so I felt a little bit like from them, they were like, okay, well, if that's what we decide. But the thing that I really remember from my stepfather, which was more than that, and I want to give him credit for it, is I remember telling him that we were going to do this. And he said, well, look, if you're thinking about doing it, do it now. Don't wait, because it's only going to get harder, or maybe your opportunities will be less. If you might do it now. And that was very encouraging.
Yeah. Do it while you're young, because you have less ties, at that point, the further you go in life, the more responsibilities you accumulate.
That's right.
Yeah, for sure.
That's right. It's only going to get harder.
Right.
And then I remember Jeanette's parents being like, the first thing that Jeanette's mom said, well, you're not going to move in with us, are you? And we said, no, we don't have to move in you. And they said, okay, as long as that's the case, we're fine.
It's a valid concern, I guess.
It is. Yeah. You tell me you're quitting your job, I want to know if you're asking me to support you.
Right. And did they, obviously they knew you well enough, up to that point, and whether probably knew that you guys were planners and, weren't leaving too much to chance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What are some crossover systems or habits from your education at MIT or from your previous career that you would attribute to your success?
Yeah. So a few things. I think, MIT, for me was really, really hard. I was a really good student in high school, obviously enough to get into MIT, and I did well at MIT, but I wasn't among the smartest at MIT. I had to work very hard to do what I wanted to do. And what I learned there was like that I was capable of a lot more than I maybe knew before, because it pushed me so much more than I had ever been pushed before. And so for me, more than anything, I think coming out of MIT, I mean, for sure, there's the analytics. You learn how to be real analytical and problem solving. There's a lot of that. But I think bigger than that is this sense of like being pushed to the point where you don't believe, I don't know if I can do this, but then doing it anyway and getting past that. And that's such a valuable, lesson that needs to be instilled over experience. And MIT did that for me, So I think coming out of that was just a really great source of what could kind of keep on driving us.
It's like
as a team.
Huge confidence builder, I would imagine. And you felt that was a crossover to skydiving.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I've done really hard before. I can do it again,
Right.
Yeah. And then the work, I think the work, it was a very professional, sort of consulting, especially when you're consulting, you're always dealing with clients. So you have to. And
if I can interrupt you for a second, What were you consulting for specifically?
So I did a couple of different stuff, but like the last thing was IT consultant. Basically what it was is like, really large companies, let's say like Pepsi or United or Delta or Kraft. And they are these giant businesses that often have like multiple business units that are spending billions of dollars every year. And back then, especially, like it was hard for them to get their head around like all that they were spending. Because a lot of times, one unit didn't know what the other unit was doing. So we had sort of software and stuff that would kind of take it, put it all together, and then give that information in a useful way to sort of business deciders that could say like, oh wow, I'm seeing that I'm spending $1 on pencils over here, and I'm spending $1.20 over here. Why don't we just combine them and maybe I can get them for 90 cents?
Okay.
So the stuff I would do was around like, customizing that software for every client, gathering the data and helping them use it, things like that. It was all right. Like I didn't mind the job, but it's not skydiving,
Right. Yep.
But the thing is that you're learning to work with lots of different clients, many of them sort of more or less amenable to your help or more or less difficult to work with. Sometimes they got really angry at you for some reason that wasn't your fault, And I think that stuff, that learning to be really professional in all different situations like that with lots of different clients really helped on the business side of rhythm and the coaching. And I remember when we started, we said, well, we don't truly know as much as, Kurt Werner and the people that we're trying to emulate, we know that, but can we be, and not to say that they aren't, but can we be the most professional? Can we take the professionalism that we learned from the consulting world and really raise that to the highest level, And so we tried to sort of make up for, in the beginning, our gaps in knowledge with that. And that has always been a big part of who we continue to be, like let's try to be not just the best teachers and the most knowledgeable about skydiving, but also the most professional, Yeah,
you guys have always been very professional and very approachable, super friendly. And, I think that means a lot to the community and, has attracted a lot of people towards you that maybe you otherwise wouldn't have. I know some teams and maybe even myself included at certain times that once we get so singularly focused on the end goal that sometimes we have blinders on and, we might be so focused on that just walking around the drop zone that we might, not have the friendliest interactions just because we're so focused, on that type of thing. But you guys have definitely seemed to, maybe it was from, learning more about human psychology through your business before. And, you've brought that over. So maybe that was one of the applications as well.
Yeah.
Crossover.
Yeah.
We talked about, how you met Jeanette, but what was it like deciding to pursue your dreams together? Did you find any challenges with it, or did you just find it was smooth sailing?
Say that again.
So what was it like deciding to pursue your dreams together? I was wondering if you had any friction along the process, because I know with, anytime you're in a relationship, you're going to have ups and downs. And sometimes, you might have friction points, or do you guys just really work and live so well together that you really don't have any of that?
So I think overall we worked better than any other teammates I've ever had. You know what I mean? Because we're just like the ultimate teammates, you know, as a married couple, and we have a great relationship, you know. But that doesn't mean there aren't sort of unique challenges as well. I mean, for sure, I think one thing is sometimes we are so close that I feel like maybe we, you know, I'll speak for myself. I might say things to Jeanette in a way that as we talked about later, you might say like, oh, well, you wouldn't have said it that way to another teammate, you know, but you're so comfortable with me that you said it in a way that could have been couched a little bit better. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you just sort of take it for granted that like, oh, I don't need to be as, I don't know.
You don't need to audit what you're saying
as
much. Right?
Yeah. But sometimes that auditing is good, right? Like there is a more effective, better way to communicate. And the truth is that should be whether you're sort of a spouse or not. But the thing is, sometimes you get so relaxed with someone that you can kind of let that up.
Right.
And so I think that was something we learned to be is treat me with the same, you know, deliberateness in your communication as the other teammates as well. You know, and so I think we had to work on that for sure. I had to some. I mean, I love being on the team with Jeanette, and I love being on a team with the teammates that I had. I love driving, you know, with Jeanette, how the team went, you know, like being kind of like really in control of that.
I was going to say, regardless, you guys had put a lot of energy into building, you know, Rhythm as a team and as a brand. Yeah,
exactly. And it's less about control. I'm not saying that I had to be controlled, but it was really something we were so proud of to have built this from nothing.
Right.
You know, and it's just very different. It's very different to join something that's already established and as awesome as it is, or to be the ones creating something from scratch and to continue to drive that. And that the latter was for us like really, really cool, you know, really special and something that was worth keeping, you know?
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And you guys created a legacy that's still going on today. And we'll talk about more about Rhythm in a minute, but I just want to talk a little bit more about your transition, that not everyone has the courage to cut ties and take action to completely shift focus towards immersing themselves in the environments necessary to follow their dreams and to pursue meaningful goals. What are some actionable steps listeners can take to prepare themselves to sever ties with the familiar in order to pursue their dreams? You know, I know you guys are the consummate planners, and not everyone's like that. You know, you guys do things down to the detail, but if there are a few actionable steps that maybe you can give listeners if they're considering doing something similar.
Yeah. I mean, I think the big thing is that really helped us is to ask like, well, what would it look like if we did this? You know what I mean? And maybe even not to let yourself get clouded by can we or can't we yet, but first, what would that ideal look like? And asking that unfettered by constraints or perceived constraints, you have a picture of that. And then you can say, okay, what are obstacles to that and how close can we come to that? You know? And I think that, like, again, a lot of this comes from Jeanette, but by asking that question, it's so easy to just say like, I mean, and I hear from so many people, I would love to be on a team, and whether not even necessarily professional, right? But I would love to be on a team that trains way more, but you know, I can't because of work, or I can't because of family, or I can't because of whatever. And it's immediately discounted as impossible. You know what I mean? And we took the approach, and we always did, of like, well, let's not talk about what we can't. Let's talk about what we want. Now let's talk about how close we can come to that, and how we would achieve how close we could come to that. And that very different mindset, we found like, oh, well, now we're in a problem solving mindset instead of like a, you know, problem finding one.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And so we could say, oh, well, okay, well, it's true. We can't do this, but we could do that, and that's close to this, you know, and this is holding us back. But if I kind of peel this part away and that part away, well, you know, I could make do with that. And you start to figure out how the obstacles are less than you thought, and how there are ways around most of them. And it never looks exactly like you planned, but it's close enough to get the things that are important to you. You know, that was the thing, that was a big thing. We talk about this a lot. It's like, whatever vision we have in our head of the goals of the thing that we're going to try to achieve in the future, we understand that what we actually achieve or the goals that actually happen or what actually turns out might be very, very different. But if we stay true to like the intent or what's important to us about those goals, that then we feel proud to have accomplished that. You know what I mean?
How different was what actually came to pass from what you guys had planned originally?
Yeah, I mean, I think quite a bit. I mean, for one thing, like I never knew how long things would be. I guess I expected that. So I came from a world of like track. I did a lot of track, and there's a certain point at which like I'd work real hard, and I got to a certain point like this is as fast as I get. And I can keep on working. I'll keep on working, but I'm not gonna get any faster than this. I'm not gonna be Michael Johnson, Usain Bolt. And in skydiving, I just assumed that I'd be the same way. Like, okay, so I'm gonna quit. I'll work a couple years to get as good as I can, and either I'll get really good, or at some point I'm just gonna find like, oh, I'm a 16 average skydiver, and that's it. One thing that surprised me was that if I kept at it, like we did keep on getting better. The other thing that sort of was definitely not expected was this challenge of like, as we got closer and closer to the top, like losing a teammate, over and over again. Right. So we got really good, and then we lost a Mikhail, and then we lost Tiago, and then whoever we lost, but each time making airspeed stronger and us weaker and having to come back from that, and those were things that just, we couldn't have possibly anticipated. We had no idea that would, so that the challenge of coming back from that year after year and was something we didn't expect, and something that was really tough, but I think if you ask like how, I would say it's because personally, and I think as a team, we kept on focusing on, is there room to continue to get better? Could we get new people? And with those people, could we get better than we ever were? We always believed that we could. And so we were willing to kind of keep working,
Nice.
Rather than that idea of like track where I got to this point where like I was pole vaulter. It's like, I wasn't even a very good pole vaulter. I got like, I think maybe 12.3, 12.6. That's not great even for high school. And being like, I'm not going to be a 15-foot pole vaulter. But here it was like, you know what? I could get another point. I know I got that. So let's keep trying.
Do you attribute that to more of a ceiling of the activity itself, or of the nature of it being a team sport? And, when you're in a team sport, your teammates will help to drive you, whether it's subconsciously or subconsciously, to perform better than you thought you could.
Yeah.
Whereas I think in an individual sport, maybe you don't get that as much. I don't know if that played a part in that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a lot. I mean, I think also the reality is like in skydiving, there's so many obstacles to it, right? It's expensive. It takes a lot of time. So I think if you have a high degree of athleticism, even if you're not necessarily, I mean, the truth is, if I were playing a sport that were one of the major sports of the world, soccer or football or basketball, like I'm not that level of athlete.
Right.
That's just the truth. But skydiving, you don't have to be,
Yeah.
It's the reality, because, it's too expensive and too time consuming and not big enough.
There are a lot of bars to entry, and it's, scary to a lot of people. It's not very relatable. So I think the pool of people, that's what I, felt when I was a kid. I was like, when I started learning skydive, I was like, maybe I can excel at this, not because I'm athletically gifted, but because the pool's a lot smaller.
Yeah.
Maybe I could,
it's the reality. Yeah. So I think that's part of it, is just sort of like, I may not be world-class for a football player, but I could be world-class for a skydiver, And then, like you said, I think having the support of Jeanette and other teammates pushing, and great coaches that pushed and believed in us, and also just the feedback. I mean, it's just what's happening. You know what I mean? Like it just, we didn't plateau, and there was also the two qualities. There was the team's scoring and my individual skills, and so I was always able to recognize that even if we took a step back because we had to get new teammates, maybe we lost one and had to get newer ones and bring them up. And even if that meant our scores were not as good, I could see, but I'm getting better. I'm faster than I used to be. I'm stronger at the exits than I used to be. I have, my knowledge is better than it used to be. And those things were rewarding enough to continue even when the team scores weren't there yet, you know?
Right. I know that that's a frustrating situation when you lose a teammate, you know, especially like you guys did to, you know, help to, you know, to farm airspeed. You know, we had in the early years of the Golden Knights when I was on the team, we didn't have permanent slots like we eventually did, you know, whereas we're able to stay up, you know, past 4 years or 4 to 6 years on the competition section. As you know, it takes a long time to produce a world-class competitor. So when you have that turnover rate too early, then you're never able to really fulfill your potential as a team. And I know that had to have been, you know, super frustrating. How did you deal with that frustration personally and as a team as well?
Yeah, it was frustrating. Yeah, it was frustrating, especially because we believe very much like, man, if this person didn't leave, we could be winning next year. You know, we're close enough that the difference between what airspeed gains and we lose, you know, that's why we're losing. But if it were the other way around, and airspeed had to take the newer teammate and we could keep, you know, that person, we really believed that could be it, you know? So it was hard. And then to start a new season and see that you're flying slower, you know, than you were. And, you know, as a team, maybe sort of working through problems that you had once solved, you know what I mean? That is hard. But I think it was for me, it was always about the refocusing internally, you know, saying like, okay, can I still with this group get better? Can I do more to help the whole team get better as well? You know, am I still challenged to do those things? And am I having fun? You know, and those things were still true, you know? And I think so as long as those things were true, I was okay and excited to continue.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a great way to look at it. And I remember when those things happened at the time that I found it impressed me how you guys handled it. Like from an outsider's perspective, you know, I never once heard any of you guys say, oh, this is the reason we lost or whatever. And, you know, it was obvious, you know, from an outsider's perspective that was, you know, what was holding you guys back from progressing to a certain level at that point in time. But, you know, you guys handled it really well. And, you know, you just, from an outsider's perspective, you just kept that forward focus and you did the best you could. And that's really awesome.
Thank you.
What is the story of how Rhythm came to be other than what we've talked about? And if you could remind me who was on the initial lineup?
Yeah. So the first Rhythm lineup was Laurent Baudouin, who we're going to the Bahamas with in like a week, a couple of weeks. Jeanette, me, and Chromie. And the way that started was the previous year. So the previous year would have been my sort of second year skydiving. So in other words, I got my license. Jeanette was already doing four-way and very much into it, but like on very kind of pickup teams, you know. She wanted to do a more serious team. I actually was, when I that first year, I was like, I don't want to do a team. I don't want to do four-way. I'm not interested in competition. But she convinced me to do an airspeed camp. And back then that was all there was. And I came out of that really being like, oh, you know, everything, what I would say is like, everything was a matter of like, Jeanette knew what was right. And then like, you know, I would go kicking and screaming and sort of like months later realize it.
Right.
And it was just, my goal is to just shorten the time it takes for me to realize that she's right.
Once you started realizing that was a pattern that was happening.
Yeah. So anyway, it was sort of winter that year. We did this camp. That camp got us really excited about four-way, or me really excited. So now the two of us wanted to do a team, and we asked all around, and everybody was excited to do a team with Jeanette. She was already quite good, and nobody honestly wanted to do a team with me. I was just too new, you know, and not at the level that Jeanette was. So if you wanted to be on a team with Jeanette, then you didn't want. So anyway, so we asked all these people. Nobody would take, everyone was like, well, we'll be on a team with you, Jeanette, you know? So ultimately we couldn't find a team together, and Jeanette joined a women's team, just happened to be all women. And there was a team that I think they just had no alternatives. And Laurent was on that team. And I remember, man, I was, this is my chance. And again, like I'm about sort of trying to be as professional as I can to compensate for lack of skill. So I sent them what was essentially like a resume and a full essay on, you know, why you should invite Steve Lefkowitz on your team by Steve Lefkowitz. You know, there are 3 good reasons, you know, And I sent them a DVD of my tunnel time, just like one-on-one, you know, and I annotated it. Look at minute 217, because the 360s really start to be much more on center, you know. And I remember Jeanette, like I showed it to Jeanette, and this specific thing, this like DVD with my notes, and she sent it back to me with edits, and it was like, you know, at minute 14 I fart, but you don't notice it, you know. And I kind of got the point for it. Yeah, maybe it was a bit too much. But anyway, I sent it to these guys. They invited me to be on a team. Like I said, I think it was just they had no alternative. And so now me and Laurent and these two other guys were on a team. Jeanette was on this other team. Chromie was coaching both the teams. A year went by with that. But then what would always happen is at the end of our training weekends, which were the same time, when the rest of both teams were kind of done, Jeanette, me, and Laurent would always be like, let's pick up somebody and like just do more. Maybe it was Chromie, you know, whatever. Can we jump more, you know? And so it became natural that at the end of the year, they're like, well, why don't the three of us find somebody and make a team? And we couldn't find another. I mean, first it wasn't that we initially thought of Chromie. We wanted to find somebody else that was not a coach, but we couldn't find someone who wanted to commit as much as we did. And ultimately we're like, well, maybe Chromie will do it. Back then, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there were player coach teams, but it wasn't as clearly, I don't know, available.
Right.
So we thought we were inventing the idea.
Okay.
You know what I mean? We went to Chromie and we're like, hey, you know, we'll pay you to be on a coach, but also be on a team. And, you know, can you do something like this? And he was like, yeah, that's called the player coach team, you know? And so that's how that first team made. And then we were coming up with names, you know, and we thought maybe something that was cool, like a musical kind of thing. Jeanette was into music a lot. And we came up with the name Rhythm. And then I remember a funny thing with Laurent, who's French, and his accent has improved more and more over time. But I remember him being like, oh, great, you came up with a word that I can't pronounce. You know, he would say, Rhythm, you know. But yeah, that was it. That was the first team.
What kind of music was Jeanette listening to?
Well, she did piano for like 12 years. She got really, really good. And so, you know, I mean, she just listens to all type of music, but I think she was just very, in college, she took some music theory as well. I don't remember if she concentrated in that, which meant you had to take like three classes at MIT it was like less than a minor, but it was something that you kind of showed extra focus on. I think she did that too. So she did some like music composition and stuff. So I don't know about like specific what type of music. I mean, she'd also listen to pop and rock and whatever, but she, you know, had a deep understanding of classical and music theory and played the piano really well. So
I think that that has definite crossover applications, like, you know, just doing the DJing that I do and the little bit of guitar and understanding more of music theory and the underlying structure. You know, I think it's got some applications to skydiving and the, you know, just like, you know, you were saying the rhythm or the beat that it kind of naturally follows. And, you know, it's super interesting.
Yeah.
How did you develop a relationship with Rook Nelson of Skydive Chicago, and how did you convince him to make a sponsorship investment in the Rhythm brand?
That's funny. It kind of went the other way.
Okay.
Which is we were at CSC and Chicagoland Skydiving Center, and we loved Doug. We had a great relationship with him, the owner there. We were doing more and more there, but kind of like the situation with the job, we were getting to this point where we knew we needed to do more. One of those things was we needed to train all year round, so we needed a winter drop zone. And we actually talked with Doug about that. And there was a moment where, like, I think there was, you know, he was going to have his planes go to somewhere in California, if I remember correctly. And we were like, that's great. But then that fell through, actually. And so we were back at this point where we're like, we want to do more. We need some place that's bigger with access to more full year training. And it was like right at that time that Rook sent us, maybe it was an email or a text or something. And it was like he was reading our mind. It was like, are you ready for like full year training or something like that? Like it was as if he'd picked it right out of our brain, you know? And I remember we got that message, and again, Jeanette and I were working. We were working at that time already still. And Jeanette like, you know, snuck into my office. Like, did you see that message? You know? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, we got to call Rook, you know? And of course we've also felt a loyalty to CSC, which had treated us very well. And like I said, we had a good relationship with them. But we talked with Rook, we did, and discussed, what we could do there, which was honestly, it was just much more than what we were capable of at CSC. And then we talked with Doug, and we were just like, look, this is the honest thing. We're growing more, we want to do more, and we just feel like, it's not really an option at CSC, and it really is at SDC. And, I think ultimately he kind of understood that. He wasn't happy, but when we left, that they felt like it was still, and my impression anyway, we were still on good terms. And then we went to SDC. I remember even a time when CSC lost at that time their ability, their license or whatever it is, to have trailers on the premises. So our only alternative to be training there, even for just like weekends at a time, was we moved our trailer, which had been there, to SDC. So we were literally, before we left TSC as our training home, living at SDC, driving away from that drop zone every morning to train at CSC, and then back every night to SDC. And there's only so much time that you could do that before you're like, what am I doing?
Right. Start to burn out, or
why am I leaving SDC? Especially we'd be there at CSC and then we'd be texting with someone at the team there, and they'd be like, yeah, we got 12 jumps today. Like, oh, we're still sitting on the ground,
Wow.
Not even for lack of, again, not to, the drop zone was great, but maybe it was weather or whatever.
Right.
But why are we driving an extra hour and a half? Just that alone, when we don't need to every day.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that I think gas money will add up over time. Just the energy to do it, for sure.
Yeah.
What advice or guidance would you offer to those wishing to seek and maintain sponsorship from drop zones and gear manufacturers? And that was one of my other questions too that I meant to tag on to. With Skydive Chicago, before you guys made your deal, what were you offering them to provide the drop zone some value as well?
Yeah, I mean, so we went there in 2009. So I guess it was the same year that we left work. So by then, like I said, we were very proactive and had thought about a plan for how we could possibly support ourselves. So by then we were beginning to coach at organize events, many throughout the summer. Also, we could potentially do that in the winter, right? At Sebastian, Skydive Chicago's sort of winter home for their planes. We were running tunnel events. So by the time we sort of moved to SDC, we had this, following of students and sort of set of events that we had established, that were kind of easy to just port over. And in fact, when we moved to SDC, now it was all of a sudden, it was like kind of easy to find a lot of the people who were like, hey, I always wanted to do your events, but I honestly didn't want to leave the bigger drop zone that was my home. Now that you're here, I'm in, and I think Rook knew that, right? So that I think was a big thing that was just clear we had to offer. We're already doing these things. We'll just do this at your drop zone. Right.
Nice. Yeah. And the benefits are obvious there for, for him as far as, getting more people, through the door and out of the planes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what advice or guidance would you have to offer those wishing to seek and maintain sponsorship, from drop zones or gear manufacturers?
Yeah. I think the first thing I would ask is it really worth it to you? In other words, a lot of the skydivers I know, especially ones that gonna get into four-wave more seriously, like a lot of them have the money, and what's more of a constraint is the time. And if that's your situation, then do you really want to give up more time in your organizing or running events or whatever you're doing to save a little bit of money? And I think for a lot of people, if they ask themselves that the answer really might not be that, that they'd rather keep that time to themselves. So I would say first thing first is think about what you might give, what that means from a time perspective. And would you rather just keep that for yourself and not take the sponsorship, But okay, but if you say like, yes, I still want to do that, then I think the thing is to recognize that like you don't really need to be super knowledgeable or super experienced already at coaching to begin something, And so I feel like you start with, if you enjoy giving to the sport, finding the ways you enjoy to do that, and then do those things, So run a beginner a rookie event that just gets rookies together and does small group stuff. As you get more comfortable, maybe that can grow into bigger stuff. But if you're passionate about it, or fine, you're passionate about big ways, then start running big ways. Do those things that you like to do to give back to the sport first. And then you can say, look, sponsors, look at the stuff that I'm doing and how successful it is. Is it worth it to you to now, give me something in exchange for me sort of to be representing you?
Right.
So I would kind of start that way. One, is it worth it first? Two, what do you want to do? And do that a bunch. And then three, if that has value, you have an easy argument with your sponsors.
Yeah, that's great advice. And if you're already giving back, then, you have that community and other people that you're affecting that makes it then more valuable for the drop zone or the gear manufacturer to, to have that additional outreach to, with that goes along with that sponsorship.
Yeah. Yeah. And if not, if you're truly just like, oh, I got to do these things because of sponsorship that I committed to, that I tried to get and somehow got, then I think you're kind of doing it for the wrong reasons. And you're not going to, it's hard for it to be sustainable, or you won't find it as reward. It's not as good, right? Like do it because you want to do it. And the sponsorship is a bonus, Yeah.
Yeah. That's great advice. Why did you decide to develop the Rhythm 401 skydiving app, and what was the development process like? Yeah,
actually, so we have two apps. We have the Rhythm Skydiving 101 and Rhythm Skydiving 401. Okay. And 101 is for sort of newer skydivers, but kind of all levels, but it's like all the basics, from like body position and slow fall, fast fall, stuff like that, to landing patterns and your flare and like to even etiquette, like how do I know my loading order and stuff like that. And the Rhythm 401 is devoted to 4-way and 8-way for people who want to learn about or already know about but want to get better at specifically that. How do those apps develop? Is actually a friend of ours and sort of mentor, very much mentor, I would say, was talking with us, and he was like, I started skydiving and I was fortunate enough to very quickly get connected with really great coaches, including us, but also like Christy Frickin out in Paris and other people. And had I not, I don't know how long I would have, lasted in this sport. I probably would have done tens of more jumps and then just sort of got bored and left, So I feel very lucky. And I know that there's people in drop zones all over the country who don't have you,
Right.
What if you had an app or something so that you could share all this information? And basically his idea was, like a rhythm coach in your pocket, and it was really his idea. That was it, and I remember we're talking about it and being like, what would it take? And man, this would be a lot of work to make all this content. We have to make all these videos and everything. And also we have to somehow develop an app. What I mean? Like that's not nothing. Of course, we didn't program it. We weren't the developers, but we hired developers to do it. But really, with his support and encouragement, and honestly, also even financial support, he said, "I'll support you to make the app if you make the content." And that's why we did it.
That's cool. It's you saw a need, that needed to be filled, or a problem that needed to be solved.
Yeah.
And and it's man, it's great. It's a great tool. I use the 401
cool.
for getting scores on skydives. As a matter of fact, I just started using it for that because I was like, oh man, it's as opposed to using the stopwatch to get all the break times and everything. You know, it's a lot easier. It automatically does it for you if you just plug in the, I just figured that out with Jen the other day. I've had it for, over a year or two now. But there's a lot of great tools within the app like that. I've used it for coaching sometimes just because it's cool to have everything all in one. Say, hey, you want to see this exit? Then I'll pull it up for people I'm coaching and see how, it's presented to the relative win and things like that. So I think it's awesome that you guys did that. And,
that's cool.
I definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear it.
Throughout your experience with Rhythm, which aspects of training and competition did you find most challenging, and which did you find most rewarding?
I guess I would say one of the most challenging things is when you think you're good at something and then you feel like you've gotten worse at it.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I'm sure
for
you know this, right? It's like, I didn't have this problem before and now I do, you know? I think, and I don't know how much, like, I feel like there's a certain portion of that that's actually perception. You know, you weren't as good at it as you thought, but now you're better overall and you realize your standards are higher. And then also sometimes you just break things, you know?
Or you focus on something else and whatever you're not focusing on might
you lose.
regress a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's tough. You know, it's tough to feel like you're going backwards in something, you know? And there's certain things that I would struggle with for a long time. And like, I don't understand it, but I'm still not, you know, I still feel like I'm somehow behind where I once was. One way to help address that was sort of to just break it down, you know, to a smaller and smaller thing. You know, like, what if I focus on just this one thing? Also, sometimes it's like, let's stop it. Let's stop trying to be better at it because it's not working right now. So let's just do, you know, sometimes I say, like, especially we go to nationals, if we're going to be shitty at this, let's just do shitty as fast as we can. You know, I don't know if I can curse. Is that okay?
No, yeah, it's fine.
You know what I mean? But sometimes it's like, I'm not trying to get any better, you know, whatever it is. And I'm just going to do that my best, you know?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges that that we always face with team training is that, you know, there's a certain amount of time because it's so logistically challenging, you know, personnel, gear-wise, aircraft, the weather, you know what I mean? You've got certain times that you have set aside for training camps, and you know, sometimes you just train. As a part of that training, there needs to be some rest planned in so that your body can, you know, build those neurological connections to be able to make those, you know, mind muscle connections and those movements that you're repeating over and over. And I think it's just like with any sport or, you know, whether it be, you know, working out, weightlifting, whatever, if you overtrain, you know, muscle, then sometimes you're going to get to a plateau and, you know, you could reverse some of those gains. So that's always been a really difficult balance to try to maintain. And that's, you know, I guess I'm just sharing, you know, know, some of the challenges that we face there.
And the other part of it, you said the positive was with...
which aspects did you find most rewarding to the experience with rhythm? Yeah,
I mean, for sure, winning nationals is one of just the most rewarding things. You know, I mean, that was just awesome. But more, I mean, that's not enough, right? I mean, to keep you doing it for what, over 15 years now, you know?
I definitely want to talk more about that later. But
But I think that the most rewarding stuff, I mean, it's cheesy, but it's the camaraderie with the team, you know, the feeling that we're all going through this together and we have this just really shared idea of our goal, of just the fun little funny stuff that happens that adds up to like a million little inside jokes, you know, that, I mean, even just like today, Andrew came over, he was coaching a team and I was coaching a team. We're at the tunnel and he's like, hey, remember that time? He's like, because Natalie, one of our students, his students brought like tacos. He's like, remember that time we were training at Elsinore and there was a taco truck and you ran and got tacos between every single jump? And I was like, yeah, I remember that. It was like land, run and get a taco, get on the plane, land, get it. And it was like easily like 12 tacos in a day, in a 12 jump day. And yeah, you know, I mean, these little things that are sort of like just little funny stories that
anybody who knows you knows that you've put away a serious amount of food, man.
Yeah. You know, I think it's that. It's those fun stories that you develop together, you know, that you're building a family together.
Yeah,
know?
For sure. And that's what, when I take a step back from it for any length of time, I think that's what I miss the most.
Yeah.
Or, you know, just those team room conversations and those funny stories that you can't really replicate unless you're in that type of environment.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And some of that might come with, you know, shared suffering through training and, you know, that kind of stuff that just, you know, brings you closer together.
Yeah. And even the arguments, you know what I mean?
Right.
Even the disagreements internally that you get over, right?
Yeah. When you have that conflict and you get over it in a productive way, it just, it strengthens that bond even more for sure. Yeah. But that's one thing I think, I'm not averse to conflict, but I tend to, you know, just try to be cool and laid back and, you know, let those kind of things roll over. But the teammates that I've had that kind of relish conflict a little more, you know, at first, you know, in the beginning stages, it causes a ton of friction. But later on, when when you realize, okay, there's something to be gained from this. And that's a cool thing about being on a team with different types of people, is that everybody brings something different to the table like that. You know, if everybody was like me on the team, I'm not sure how successful we'd be. We might all get along, but but with that conflict, I think it causes improvement sometimes if it's done in a productive way.
Yeah. Yeah.
What have been some of your best and worst competition moments? So we talked about a nationals there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the best was for sure is winning U.S. Nationals in 2019, and the I would say, to get as precise as possible, it was tracking away from round 11. Because tracking away, I remember saying to myself, like, I don't know what airspeed did, but that was us at our best. Like we did everything I could have hoped for, and if they win, they're better than us. Great, And if we win, even better, you know what I mean? Right. But it sort of almost didn't matter at that moment, and just what a cool thing to have been a part of, So I think that was a highlight,
I was, for those that don't know, I was on the other side of that. I was asked to fill in for someone on airspeed with about 3 months notice before nationals. And, I had the privilege of training with airspeed for that amount of time, and then going into competition against you guys. And I think it was harder for the other guys on airspeed because they'd been so invested in that team for so long. And for me, I think I was never like to lose, of course, So, but on the other hand, I know how much you guys had put into it, and it was awesome to see your expressions on the podium, man. It made me happy to see you and Jeanette. I've got this picture in my head of Jeanette, the ones that were in parachutists and stuff, where she just, you can't fit any more joy into that expression, you know what I mean? It's just, it's awesome. So that was a great competition. It was it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And even I guess maybe the other moment then was the moment that it was judged and we knew, you know what I mean? The moment that and just everyone in the whatever hangar, was just sort of uproar, and what a cool thing, and the support, right? That is, and then looking around, and like the team we hugged each other, and then like everyone, I got hugs from former teammates that were around,
cool.
and coaches, but then like our friends that were just and students,
that's awesome. And then when Rook came, flew his plane right up to the hangar and got out, that was just, added to the whole experience, I'm sure, for you.
Yes, that's right. I remember hearing this part, like kind of still just chokes me up, that like they're at SDC and apparently they're following the, round by round. And there's a point at which the tandems are in the loading area at SDC and they're like, it's round 11 and it's about to get judged. We're not going up on this plane.
Wow, I didn't know that.
We are not going until we find the answer to, did Rhythm win?
Right.
And what a cool thing to hear about that, and it still kind of chokes me up. And they're like, and they told their students, apparently, they're like, you don't understand, but like our team is out in another, in North Carolina, and any minute we're going to find out if they won, and we're not taking off.
That's cool that you had the support of the whole drop zone, and it's cool because you're great people, not because necessarily that you're badass skydivers, but because you're great people and you've had that outreach there, and that's really awesome. That says a lot.
Well, that's cool.
What about some of your worst competition moments?
That's tough to say. I think. It was a while ago, and I don't even remember what year it was, but I still think it's like a worst that we turned into something good. But there was a year we were at, I think it was in Arizona. Yeah, it was in Arizona. We were first getting close enough to, I think even, we weren't gonna reach number one, but I think to medal. I think it was our first year of getting close enough to medal. And in fact, we were in second place for a while. And slowly, round after round, Fury and the Knights teams were catching up to us. And round 10 came, and we had like a problem. I don't remember the whole dive, but I remember it had an N and an A and a 3 in it. And we took sort of like a different engineering. And I remember personally not looking enough and sort of moving on from like an N that wasn't there, going to like a 3 and getting on before things were let go, and knowing that would potentially cost us sort of 2 busts at a point when we were like now neck and neck with 2 other teams, and landing and feeling like really, just really terrible about that, And I remember I couldn't watch them being judged, so I kind of walked outside. A lot of times I have a hard time watching stuff get judged. It's just so tense. And
sometimes I find that's worse than actually, doing the skydive yourself.
For sure. And apparently, so I wasn't there for a judge, but apparently the score was high enough, before busts. But then the judges looked at it, and we got 2, maybe even, I think we got a 3rd bust out the door. Yeah, it was an A out the door that we didn't get for video. And that, all 3 of those busts knocked us down from second to 4th. I think both teams passed us up by those because of that. Or maybe I'm wrong, and maybe we just went from 3rd to 4th because of it. Maybe we were already at lost second. I don't remember that. But that was hard. And it was hard for a while, and it's something I still remember. But at the same time, it was a moment when we said to ourselves, yes, we didn't do it, but we can do this. We believed in the possibility more than ever before. And shortly after that, we went to Dubai. It was the first time we got to go to Dubai, I think in 2012, 2013. And we were like, we're not going to let this happen again. And we were up against Fury again, and we beat them then, Nice. And that was a cool redemption, like just a couple months later, and a feeling of like, we knew it. We knew we could do this, and then we did, and we were just going to keep on going forward from there,
Yeah, that's awesome how you learn from those experiences, and you're able to, hopefully get some redemption.
Yeah. I've never quite let go, the mistake.
Oh, right.
But I can continue to tell myself of the positives from it,
Yeah. The mistakes I've made in competition too, like for the airspeed thing, I was definitely, I think because I was, newer to that team, I was definitely the weaker link. And I'm sure that, I did the most of, which resulted in our performance at the time. And that's hard to let go of for sure. Or any other mistake that I've made, I totally agree. It's like, I know that I cost us this, and there's I usually remember like the really, really awesome moments, and then the really, really bad ones.
Yeah.
In between, they all kind of, blur together, but those definitely stick out. Why do you think competition is important, not only in skydiving or sport, but in life in general?
Why do I think competition is important?
Yeah.
I think competition is really important. Now we have a daughter. She's going to be 3 soon, and I want her to have as many competition experiences as she can. And I think it's because I guess I would say maybe more than competition per se is performance opportunities, because I believe you could probably get the same kind of thing, say from performing music or something,
Mm-hmm.
but having a moment where this is it, this is the only time that matters, and then doing your best at that moment, I just think there's like nothing that replaces that, and there's nothing that pushes you to be at your best more than that, so like without competition, you have no idea how great you could be at something, and without competition, you don't learn how you could be better, to the extent that only competition gives you, that even practice doesn't, So I just think, if you're someone like me, who like I'm always driven to everything I want to be better at, it just there's no replacement for there's nothing that can replace competition, in helping you do that.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for that pressure cooker environment, and like you said with music, it doesn't maybe necessarily have to be head-to-head competition, but it's like, you've got some kind of performance where you have to perform in front of people and be in that, that high pressure environment to, to raise the stakes and to, raise your level.
Yeah.
There's definitely a lot to be said for that. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on that. I'd like to shift focus just a little bit and talk about performance, failure, and success. In your opinion, what are some of the most important elements or attributes one needs to possess or develop in order to attain champion or elite level success?
What are the attributes that are important for success?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. I think probably if I summed it in one word, I would say it's sort of resilience, a sense, and I remember I'm at work, not the IT work, but before that I worked in like logistics consulting, and we would do a lot of what we called change management, but helping organizations sort of make difficult changes from sort of one set of behaviors to a new. And we talked a lot about resilience there, about how what makes a person able to overcome obstacles, right? Because you're going to have obstacles. And I remember, I honestly don't remember like all the five, but they kind of broke it down into sort of like proactiveness, being organized, being positive. There's a couple more that right now escape me, but like those qualities, I think, which all add up to you being resilient, are probably the most important thing, because the only way you get sort of great is by doing it in spite of the obstacles, not because you're not faced with obstacles. You were lucky to not have them, because everybody will, you know? That, and I think a commitment, maybe that's part of it, that makes you more resilient or less too, but a commitment to something, the thing being worthwhile. You know what I mean? Like you're not going to be great at something if it's not something that you really, really love to do. So I think you combine a passion for something with an ability through resilience to overcome the obstacles. And I think those two things will make you great,
Yeah, no, I agree with that. That's not really, where I would have imagined you, going to initially, is the resilience. But no, yeah, I totally agree. You're absolutely right. You've always struck me as an extremely disciplined person. Is going the extra mile something that's second nature to you, or do you find it as a form of resistance needed to be pushed through?
I think I'm kind of inclined towards that. Yeah, I think so. I think especially that's something to especially happen at MIT. I graduated high school and I didn't have to work super hard, but according to my parents, I did work hard. I don't remember that. In my head, I didn't work very hard. But anyway, went into college. I remember the first semester get started, and at least by my, memory of it, I didn't work very hard at first. And the first couple tests, I didn't do very well. And all of a sudden I was like, oh shoot, I gotta work. And it scared me. And I remember it, again, my memory of it is I took like a full 180 to like, I am just going to work as hard as I can, because this is my only way to like do well. And all of a sudden, and the thing is too, that what people made fun of me, because MIT was pass fail freshman year, not even pass fail, pass no record. So what that means is if you failed, they would wipe it from your record like you never took the course.
Wow.
So there's zero kind of risk to you. You know what I mean? You either pass or don't worry about it. Mm-hmm. Because it was so hard, they were trying to encourage people to like, there was enough stress as it was to like, alleviate some level of that stress by having that rule. Regardless of that, I was so scared from the beginning of like after those first couple of tests that I was like, I got to use this year to figure shit out and to get good enough so that when I am on grades, I'm going to do well. So I just went into work really, really hard mode.
So you realized that there was a talent deficit gap that you needed to fill there in a hurry.
Yeah, with hard work. Right. Yeah. And I really feel like from then on, I just became like a really hard worker. And there's maybe that sort of insecurity of like, this is not going to happen naturally. So I'm going to compensate for that lack of maybe the talent or the natural skill or natural intelligence by just working harder than everybody else. And even to the point where like I'd be anxious, like, and I still kind of feel like this of like, it may be a bit hard for me to relax. Instead, I'm thinking like, what else could I be doing right now? What should I be doing? Or even a guilt if I'm not, what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it was that moment, freshman year of college, that really turned me into that.
Yeah, it made it part of your normal operating system from then on.
Yeah.
So that raised, I've got it, to talk about a little bit later, but I think it's a great segue now to talk about your suffering / success equation. Like I equate success with a certain degree of suffering, whether that's physical suffering, if, at the age that I'm at now, when we're making 12 jumps a day, my body's hurting, or whether it's preparation for, this podcast or whatever, and making sure if I feel like, there's got to be some degree of suffering, I guess, I've got to sit here for, long hours to, prepare the questions or whatever the case may be. What's your relationship with that equation?
Yeah, that's a funny question. And it's funny that you asked me that because, it makes me think of in college. So I was a pole vaulter. Like I said, even then I wasn't great, but when we graduated, my coach and also very good friend, he became a very good friend. He gave us all like sort of funny, goofy awards, and the award I got was the Pain Good Award because I was known for pushing myself, even the track team as well, to just levels of pain that just, other people. So, I mean, like literally, for instance, we would have a wall sit challenges, and
are you shaking like a dog shitting peach seeds as you're
absolutely. But I could go for minutes longer than anybody else, and I don't think it was because I was stronger, but it was because like I could eat up the pain.
Stronger psychologically.
Yeah. And I mean, Jeanette teases me like, on the team, I would like, in rhythm, I knock into people and they always talk to me about like, my elbows and knees are very pointy. I'm a very pointy person and I hurt people, I've hurt people. And then, when it got done back to me, a lot of times we would land and someone would be like, man, I just need you in the head and my knee hurts real bad. Like, is your head okay? And I'd be like, I didn't know,
Didn't even feel it.
Or Jeanette would be like, man, you were pinching me. So I started pinching you back and I had no idea, And so I think there's a certain amount of like, literally, I just am not feeling pain as bad as other people.
So it's something physiological that sets you apart from everybody else in that regard?
A little bit. And then also just, like I'm okay. I'm just okay with it, So from when you talk about the suffering part, like I'm okay with it.
Has that always been something that's been part of you, or is it something that you developed at a certain age? Or
no, I think that's just been a part of me. I think it's just something like I think I loved running always. A lot of that was sort of I like the tough runs. Again, like I wasn't the fastest sprinter. So like the things I would do would maybe the 4, the 8, the 5K, like those are like, especially the 4, like those are hard, painful runs, like nobody gets in a lot of pain running 100 meters, and when you get long enough, then that's hard too. But like, the 400 meters is just pain for 400 meters, you know what I mean? And I don't know. I think that, I gravitate towards that. I gravitate towards pain.
That reminds me of something Lance Armstrong said, the doping stuff aside, but he was, he talked about what set him apart from some of the other competitors was just his ability to, take that pain for longer periods of time and, just push, past those thresholds. That's incredible stuff. I'd like to dig in deeper at some point, but, and this leads in great to, you always keep yourself in great shape. We talked about some of your athletic background. Is there anything that you've left out that we haven't talked about? And I also want to ask why you think maintaining a certain level of fitness is so important for training and competition.
Yeah. Sorry, what was the first? So what's the first part of the question?
What do you do to keep yourself in shape now? What's your training regimen like? We talked about your athletic background.
Okay.
Is there anything that we left out?
What I do now, like most of what I do is like insanity or other sort of, the sort of high intensity interval training, which I think I've been seeing more and more people kind of questioning that is it the best sort of way to work out. I know there's lots of different things, but I like, to me, I think, okay, what are we doing in four-way anyway? We're doing like these minute-long sprints of very agile, quick movements that involve both, there's like I said, strength and speed, So these workout videos like Sean Teen's Insanity and things like that, I feel like I'm doing exactly that. I have these sort of 30s to 1 minute long sort of sprints of something, and then it changes to something else, So I'm working on both sort of speed and agility and in these short intervals. And I enjoy it. I think that's part of it too. If it's a workout that I'll do because I like doing it, then that's way better than a better workout that I'm not going to do.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I've always done that. And I've always loved running. So I try to, keep running,
Yeah, I find that when you're talking about the high intensity interval training, I was doing that quite a bit when I first learned about it. Kind of with any fitness trend, that I seem to gravitate to, I'll overdo it, for a bit, like I did with CrossFit, and high intensity interval training goes along with that. The more studies that I've read about recently seem to say that using that as a supplement to your normal programming is kind of the best route to do, because I found myself, if I overdid it, I was like breaking myself down, almost opening up myself to sickness and that kind of stuff if I did it too much. But it probably depends on the individual as well, like you, or your pain threshold's way up there. You're probably able to do it in a consistent way and it won't bother you. But whereas I was a little bit different with that.
And I've heard, and I think it's true, that like the reality is the idea was that you go 100% and then rest, and 100% and rest, and the reality is you can't do that, right? So you don't do that. So are there better ways,
Oh, right.
And that's the thing that I've read recently as well, and I think that's true. It's just I just go back to like and I'm open to doing other things, but I just go back to I enjoy it, I do it, doing something is better than not doing the better thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, something that you're going to do consistently. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And sustainably.
Yeah.
What kind of music do you listen to get yourself juiced up for a workout or for a competition jump?
So it's fun. Okay, so for competition, I really, I actually have one song in my head that I had, sung to myself over and over, and I this is ridiculous, but I don't remember the name of the song, but it's Led Zeppelin, and it's the one that's like you know that song? I don't remember the name
of it too.
I can't remember the name, but I sing that in my head, and actually, and I was doing this even at sort of world championships. I like to get to a point where when I'm visualizing in the plane, especially, I can sing the song in my head and visualize the dive without saying the letters or the numbers, but I see myself just doing it. The song replaces and makes impossible me saying the letters and numbers. And I've always felt, this is me, but I really feel like it works for me, that when I'm at a point where I don't need the letters and numbers, when it's all one dance that flows naturally from one thing to the next, then it makes me like brain lock proof, and it makes me the most into the flow of it. Because also, if I'm singing to myself, I can't be adding talk, so I can't be saying to myself, oh, and remember to do this and don't do that, and because it's nothing. Right. All that the words in my head are this Led Zeppelin song, and what I'm seeing is me doing this great round. And
it's been that same song.
It's been that same
career?
song. I've tried other songs, but like nothing works as well as that for me.
That's so incredible.
It's pretty much always that.
I'm trying now. It's going to bug me. Whatever name of that song is. It might be Dire Maker, but I know exactly the song that you're telling. Great song. Yeah. Now I'm going to think about that whenever I'm doing skydives from now on.
I love it, and what I found also is it's a little bit of a barometer. If I'm getting on the plane, or if I'm in the plane and I'm trying to visualize and I can't do that, I recognize, I'm too distracted. I'm too caught up in the debriefing. Wow. You know what I mean? So I know, I gotta get it to that.
That I was going to ask you, what pre-jump and pre-competition visualization techniques do you practice? And that's one. Do you have any others?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, I do that even on the ground too with my visualization. For competition, and I work the dive a lot. I'm visualizing when it's competition, sort of over and over again.
Do you use different camera angles, so to speak, or is it always from the first person within the formation?
Yeah, so I've heard of I've thought about that a lot. I'm almost exclusively first person. I just feel like I'm visualizing me doing it. and what it will feel like when I see me doing it, you know? And while I respect the other things, like seeing it from above, that's not what I'm seeing. Yeah. Okay. For me, it's first person, you know?
And how deep do you get into it? Do you get, like colors, expressions on different people? Like when I visualize, I try to visualize in great detail, and I'll even go as far as, you know, when you're in the preparation phase, when you're in the dirt dive, or when you're creeping, you know, that's the time where you identify potential problems, and those could be problems based on the engineering or based on, you know, maybe a person's having a hard time. You know, you notice that they're brain locking a couple times, so, you know, I put that in my head, like, okay, that's a potential, you know, situation or a potential problem that might happen, you know, up in the air, and I need to be ready for that in real time so that it doesn't affect my flow, so that I don't add to the problem and I'm part of the solution. Do you visualize those kind of things happening as well, or?
I don't. I respect that, but I always felt like, I visualize it perfect, or the best perfect I can be. I try to visualize it. It's very like sort of sense and like very execution. You know what I mean? Like no analytics at all. You know, I'm not talking with myself about what's going on or noting things. I'm just doing very much. And I feel like, for me anyway, that if I can get fully into that mode, then I'm ready for anything, you know? Whereas I feel like otherwise, again, for me, if I'm thinking about things that I think might go wrong, then that becomes a distraction from me doing my best thing. I'm thinking about that, not me. You know what I mean? And so many of the times it's like, if I thought this thing went wrong, but you know, it was this other thing you know? So it's more about like, just for me anyways, like just really big eyes, you know, and sort of like I'm ready for anything, and I can make success happen no matter what, you know, rather than one specific thing I'm seeing. Okay. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I find it super fascinating how, you know, all the different competitors that I've talked to over the years have, you know, different ways of visualization and you know, preparation, you know, for that. I find it so fascinating. But hopefully in talking to everyone over the years, I've gained, and hopefully the listeners can gain, you know, something, you know, take away, you know, a little bit from, you know, the different people, and put together what works for them. Yeah. Because everybody is unique in that respect. During training and competition, what pre and post jump rituals do you find most beneficial to automate certain tasks or behaviors in order to fully focus and reserve mental energy for real-time critical problem solving, which inevitably arises during a jump?
Yeah. So a couple things. We talk a lot about like having it in our heads, an idea of like, is this important for the success of this jump as distractions happen? In other words, that's the question I ask. So the common thing we often talk about is like we're about to like go to the mock-up or something like that, and the guy who's in charge of taking photos, the team photos, like, hey guys, you know, I really wanted you to take a team photo by round 2, and this is it, you know, and just it is, you know, I respect that is a hard job, you know what I mean? Yeah. I don't want it, and he's doing what he should, but like, do I need this to be something that's stressing me right now before I do? No, then I'm ignoring it, you know, But the story that I tell a lot was one of the meets in Dubai. We were taking off from the drop zone in Dubai, and then we were landing at the Palm that year. And we took off. As we're climbing, they said, well, there's weather, so we're going to come back down. So we start to come back down. And again, what I said to myself was like, we may or may not. That doesn't matter. I'm going to keep on being prepared for this jump. So we started to ascend. Then they said, oh no, it's looking better, so we're going to go back up. So we went back up. Again, I'm mentally preparing for the jump, you know? Then they said, no, it looks bad. We're coming back down. So they started to descend. Then, and again, it doesn't matter. Finally, you know what? It is bad where we were going to jump. We're going to jump at a new area. We're going to land on the drop zone itself versus at the Palm, which none of us had ever done before. So you're going to land in a new place. That's also, by the way, surrounded by water, you know? Yeah. And also there's tons of tents and like other crazy stuff going on. There's like a tiger. Literally, there was a tiger walking around. That's not even a joke, you know?
I know. I've been out there. It's crazy. Yeah.
And every moment it's like, is this important for me to succeed at it? I mean, of course it's a safety question, but like I decided we were safe and we were going to be fine. That wasn't really a problem. So now if it's not a safety issue, what is important for us to jump? None of those things. It's the light green and are we going? And if so, then I'm prepared, So I feel like having this mindset of like evaluating and easily throwing away distractions by asking yourself that simple question, is it okay, first, does it affect safety? If not, is it important for my success at this jump? If not, ignore it. I see a lot of people get distracted by things that they don't need to,
Yeah. How important do you find it to train at the competition site before you go into it? Because a lot of those issues that pop up, sometimes you can find out about those before the actual event. Sometimes you can't because it's hard to recreate, the entire event itself. Yeah. But I find that being more prepared for those, decision making takes energy, right?
Yeah,
so the more that you don't have to make, certain decisions and you're mentally prepared for the setup and the way of things, do you guys find a lot of value, or have you found a lot of value when, you were with Rhythm and training at a competition site before the actual competition?
Yes. Yeah, it definitely is. Every time we've gone to a meet that wasn't our home, even if it's a place like Arizona where we had jumped quite a bit before, Paris or North Carolina, we wanted to be there several days before and get practice jumps in there. And every team that I go with now, with 8-way, often it's harder because you have people already doing 4-way. But if there's 4-way and if we can, or even if 8-way and we can, I want some practice jumps there. Because like you said, for me, I want to set a routine at that drop zone that I can reproduce. And I get that routine down to like, at what altitude am I going to put on my gloves?
Right. Those were some of the rituals that I was
exactly.
trying to get at.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I have that, which isn't predefined. You know what I mean? Like I don't have that defined in my practice. It kind of, really? I kind of like redo that every time I'm in my practice for the meet. Another thing is like how I put on my booties. Normally in training, I like to put my booties on like as late as possible, honestly, just to save the booties. But when it comes to meat, usually I'll put it on just before we step onto the plane, as we're walking into on the tarmac. So there's that, there's the timing of putting on the booties. When I put on my gloves, there's a timing of when I am prepping, visualizing in the plane, and when I take breaks, But all those things I kind of refine and make more precise, specifically at the location too.
Wow.
Yeah.
I try to do as much of that as I can in training so that it's, there's no difference once I get to competition. You kind of, compete as you train type of deal. But so that's super interesting. I wonder what your thoughts are on the flip side of that, because you see some people that get too overly involved in the ritualistic practices, and then when something interrupts that, as often happens, in a dynamic environment like that, then it kind of throws some people off a little bit. Have you ever witnessed that, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe that's what's helped me a little bit, why I like kind of redefine it at each place, because sort of like, if I'm putting on my booties, here, and then all of a sudden, like, it just doesn't work for where the plane is loading and stuff like that. Like, okay, here's my new plane as I put on my booties here, know, and if I normally put on my gloves at like 3,000, but this plane is taking longer to climb, and I just would like, the cadence of my in-plane prep to, because normally it's like the putting on the gloves is sort of this break from the visualization for me, you know what I mean? It's this little bit of moment where like it's mundane and I can break away from the stress. So like, okay, where in this plane ride is that most helpful to me? So for me, I think actually I have my training ritual, but then refining it there allows me to be flexible when that particular location isn't amenable to what my previous, process was.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
And I'm very much like, as much as the routine as I have, if it changes, then I'm honestly pretty easy with being like, okay, well then here's my new routine.
Right.
I'll just do that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's but that is something that, I've noticed with some people where they're not as flexible with that. It can kind of get to them.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was maybe an interesting point to bring up for listeners that, might be struggling with that or trying to find a line or reason, to do that. But you just, talked about that with, different different settings and the different tempo or the different cadence of things. So that's really good point. And this kind of goes back to the talent deficit gap that we were talking about earlier, but how much of your success do you attribute to talent and how much to hard work?
Like way more hard work than talent, for sure. Like, I mean, I do think like I was pretty good at stuff, you know. I think there's a minimum talent for sure, but also I think that a lot more people have the minimum talent and don't have the hard work versus vice versa. And maybe, you know, not for lack of even, it's just they've decided that it's not a commitment worth it for the hard work needed, you know. But I think for sure, I definitely don't think I'm the most talented or even nearly the most talented, you know what I mean? And I think there's just so many things that I needed to work and work and work. But again, I sort of being one who has no problem with pain and with repetition. I'm happy to do that. And I think that maybe is one of my strongest assets to have gotten better. You know, my teammates would joke with me that like, you know, there were some times when I would get in and I would still be working on one-on-one skills. You know, always I think one-on-one skills are important. So like, you know, the year we're going to the world meet and I'm getting in and doing like 15 minutes of 360s, you know, and they were like, Steve, you can't do 15 minutes of 360s, you know? And I'm like, yeah, I can. You know, I don't know if it's a great idea.
No, watch me.
Yeah. And I mean, to the extent where I would maybe be too much, but yeah, if it's a question of hard work versus talent, like I would say way more hard work.
I think it was Salvador Dali that said something to the effect, I'm probably butchering this, but said something to the effect of repetition is what the gods take note of or something. You know? And I always found that quote, you know, interesting. It's like, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. You know, the more repetition that you do in preparation, you know, before competitions, then the easier things are going to be for you, you know, in the long run. And I like how you know, brought that up as far as it doesn't matter what level you're at, you know, to do one-on-one training or one-on-one work because, you know, we can always get better. It doesn't matter what level we're at. I remember someone, you know, saying when I had that opportunity with airspeed, Nick got in and was Nick Hemlin. He was doing a bunch of one-on-one drills with me. And, you know, people were saying, you know, Matt, you're an experienced flyer. Why are you doing this? And I was like, well, you can always get better. And that experience for me made me, I mentioned this to Nick recently, and how appreciative I was of him for taking that time with me because I think it changed my flying style for the better. And I think it's, you know, made me a better flyer, you know, for that experience. And, you know, a lot of that was attributable to those one-on-one sessions and changing my fundamental body position and, you know, things like that, issues that I didn't really know that, you know, that I had. So you can always get better. It doesn't matter what level you're at.
And I respect that more. You know what I mean? Like, honestly, like someone who I know has worked really hard and continues to work hard and maybe has slightly less talent than someone who's super talented but isn't working as hard. Like I gravitate towards the hard worker, you know, and I believe more in the hard worker, you know, because in the end, talent will only take you so far. But I believe that hard working, you know, again, you need to have a minimum for sure. You can't take, you know, no athleticism and turn it into something. But when you have that threshold, I just think that the hard work is the more important thing.
Yeah, totally agree. And just going back to Nick Hemlin, he's definitely a hard worker. Whatever team that I've been with him on, he's wanted to push. And you know, it's like him and Scott Rhodes. You know, they were those kind of pushers and hard workers, and they were both, you know, extremely talented skydivers. But you know, I think a lot of that came from hard work.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that with us. I wanted to talk a little bit more of how you deal with failure. I wanted to unpack it a little more and see if, you know, it's definitely a really hard thing to, you know, we talked about some of your worst, you know, competition moments, but is there anything, are there any takeaways from how you deal with failure that you might be able to offer to the listeners? You know, maybe a couple of steps there or something.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the big thing for me is, I don't remember, there's some cliche quote about like, it's not failure if you're going to keep on trying, right? You know what I mean? Like if you haven't quit yet.
Right.
And so I really embraced that, like a sort of like, okay, I mean, of course you could say, well, I failed to win the national that year that I didn't win a national or something like that. Yes. But if my I guess, the thing is maybe a more precise or better understanding of what your true goals are. Your goals to get better and better, your goals to have this awesome team that will continue to grow, and then, to eventually achieve like the highest scoring and medaling that you can. Then it's sort of like, 1 year where you don't win is not a failure. You know what I mean? So I just feel like, I mean, of course you feel like you've failed at winning, but you're not a failure, and it's not a failure if you can say it's okay, it's one more step towards what I want to continue to achieve. And the other thing that I realized sort of more recently on sort of retiring from being super competitive is that it's also, I think, okay to say it's not a failure. I feel like, for myself at least, if I've decided that it's no longer my priority. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So now I have my daughter, and I've done a lot of great things, and I really want to spend a lot more time there. I don't necessarily have the same push to devote as much to it. And so if I'm deciding to continue to commit myself to the things that are most important to me, then I'm sort of never failing. You know what I mean?
Right.
Even if I don't achieve everything the way I wanted it to. I think there's a difference between sort of not succeeding at the achievements that you specifically wanted and failing. I can not achieve everything, but I can still continue to succeed at what's important.
And maybe you learn some lessons along the way that you didn't anticipate beforehand. Yeah,
for sure. I think you're right. I mean, to be fair, like you sometimes you learn so much more about, you always, I think, learn so much more about how to get better when you come up short,
right,
than when you achieve it all.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep, for sure.
That's where all the good information is at, for sure.
Yeah, and there's a natural arc to every competitor's journey, right?
Yeah.
There's seasons for everything, and I find myself that I'm in the twilight of my full-time skydiving career now, and starting to shift focuses to other things potentially. So, yeah, I think that's a natural thing.
What I was going to say, the other thing that I remember we talked about a lot, and I realize I think it's worth noting, is that I never put everything in one thing. What I mean by that is, it was never only about just, say, winning. It was also about building this great team, and it was about doing this with Jeanette, and it was about being the best I can be and helping my teammates do that, and it was about building this great skydiving coaching thing, and giving more to the community, and making the app better, and running cool events, and those events that would be like good for newer people, but then also more events for more experienced people, and helping the advanced teams do better, and helping the people just off AFF do better. When you have all these things,
you've stacked a bunch of wins there that aren't necessarily, achieving the top spot, on the podium all the time.
Yes.
Yeah,
and
sure.
So when that one thing doesn't happen, you don't feel like it was that or nothing,
Right.
And that was super, super important. And I think that's the thing that's kept me going,
I think the coaching, for you guys has been a huge win. That seems to something that's come out of the whole rhythm experience, from my perspective, is that, you guys have built this tremendous community, and, you add a lot of surplus value to the skydiving community through your coaching endeavors, and you play a significant role in helping to foster a culture of mentorship and community building under the Rhythm brand. Why do you feel that's so important, and what do you find most rewarding about that?
Yeah. For one, selfishly, like, I feel like, okay, if I have a lot of things that I can feel good about, then if one of those things isn't going so well, I have the others to lean on, So if I have a moment where I take a step back in competition, I can still be very proud of what we're doing in the coaching, or even vice versa. If I have a moment where I'm feeling a little bit maybe not as excited about coaching, but really it doesn't happen that much to me. But if there's a problem, I can, I've got it all, But sorry, remind me the gist of the question.
Yeah, no worries. You've really helped to foster a culture of mentorship and community building under the Rhythm brand. Why do you feel that's so important, and what do you find most rewarding about it?
Yeah, I guess I enjoy teaching. I enjoy seeing people get better and then feel good about themselves for having done that. I have to say that's probably the most important thing. Like, more important than me helping someone be a better skydiver is me helping someone feel proud at having done something better and that sense of accomplishment they have. You know what I mean? So whether it's someone who's really not very good at all, just getting slightly better and being super happy about it, or someone who's really, really great and then getting to a higher level, both those things are just super rewarding to me. And that is, and in fact, I'd rather have someone who is, let's say an older skydiver, maybe they're sort of in their 60s and they know they're not going to be a world champion, but they, with my help, they feel really good at being able to do something that they weren't able to do before. I'd rather that than I'm helping this really great advanced team and I know I've gotten them to be better, but they don't feel good about it at all. And they kind of only focus on, what they're not doing well and more negative, you know?
Yeah.
I'm rewarded by helping people feel rewarded by their improvement, And that is what drives me to coach, I guess. Yeah,
that's a really cool insight that I think I feel the same way about coaching, but maybe I wouldn't have articulated it, quite in those terms. So that's awesome. I really like that. What are the biggest challenges you've experienced in coaching or big way organizing?
So I do very little big way organizing, to be fair. Doug is amazing, and he has this all-American sort of brand and groups, and he does tremendous stuff. For me, I was never into big way so much, so I don't do a lot of big way organizing. But other coaching and stuff like that. Sorry, no, I lost it again.
Yeah, no, that's all right. What are the biggest challenges that you've experienced in coaching?
Okay. What's the biggest challenges in coaching? I would say probably people who kind of immediately focus on what they didn't do, like negativity, you know what I mean? Who aren't able to recognize their growth. You know what I mean? It can be hard to not almost get into an argument where it's like, you don't see this, like I see it, and you're not happy about this. I'm happy for you, like, why aren't you? But of course that doesn't do anything, right? You can't convince someone to that.
Do you think it's a lack of positive mindset or a lack of self-awareness, or maybe a combination of both in people like that?
Yeah, I think some people are sort of, through whatever their experience, are a little bit more sort of wired into a habit of maybe they've found that they feel like it helps them to be better, to focus on the things that they aren't good at, right? So they think, look, if I focus on my weaknesses, I'll get better. But that means all I'm thinking about is my weaknesses, And I truly don't believe that. I think it's just as important to think about your things you're good at and make them stronger as it is to recognize your weaknesses and make them stronger, right? Like, all of those things could be better. And in fact, if you ignore your strengths, then you can lose them, right? Like you were talking about earlier. So I think that the hardest part for me is when trying to somehow encourage people in an effective way to recognize that, without trying to just somehow like tell them that they're wrong in not recognizing it.
Right. That's a big challenge. How do you approach that?
That's a good question. One is I try to address it. Like, hey, do you recognize that this is going on? And sometimes that can be enough for some people, sometimes it's a matter of I try to explain, a little bit of like, these are the things that I found to be effective for me, why I think that stuff is important. If I'm at my best, I might be able to ask good questions for like, why do you think you feel that way, to kind of draw it out them, because I understand, I believe that being a good mentor is more about kind of like leading someone to their conclusions rather than just telling them.
Right.
So at my best, I'm doing that. But but those are the things I try to do to get them to realize it, you know.
And that's that's one of the elements that might be difficult to manage with all the other things that are going on when you're coaching, especially in the size of camps that you do. You know, one of the things that fortunately I don't have to do it much because, you know, whether I'm tagging along with you or if Gina Billings is organizing the camps, the administrative part, you know, that seems extremely difficult, and you have a lot of variables in there, you know, with planning the timelines and all that stuff. Do you find that challenging, or because you're kind of wired, you know, from an early age to be a planner, do you find it interesting and more like a game?
Yeah. So, okay. There are parts that are really, really challenging. So what you're talking about is we do these tunnel workshops. We call them this tunnel camp. We can easily have close to 40 people in a 3-day weekend doing, you know, in the mid 30s hours of tunnel time over 3 days. And it's a ton of work to organize beforehand. And especially because the way we do it is, I think, somewhat unique in that, whereas many of these things you show up and everyone is kind of doing the same plan, you know, like everyone, okay, you know, you're doing sort of 4 hours 8-way, or you know, you're doing like an hour and a half of one-on-one, you know, over 3 days or whatever. Ours is very much like, you tell me what you want to do and I'm going to fit you in. But that makes the puzzle like so much more complicated, you know?
Right.
Not only am I going to fit you in I'm going to fit your budget in. I'm going to fit the amount of time you want to do in. I'm going to fit in the type of time you want to do in, as in 4-way, 8-way, one-on-one. And I'm going to work it in within the time you have to fly in and the time you have to fly out, you know? But it's super hard. Certain aspects of that I don't like. What I would say I don't necessarily like is, you know, I don't know, like, let's say collecting the money, you know, collecting payments, or like making sure I've got enough t-shirts, you know, like that's not fun, you know, but I want that to all be there. What I don't mind, and I kind of do like, is like the puzzle of scheduling it, which is this huge complex puzzle. Or even, I have to say, it's funny, but like when someone cancels last minute, especially like I'm upset if someone did it because I think they've just been like, what do you call it? Careless, you know, like, oh, I forgot and now I can't make it, or something else came up and I just don't feel like coming. Like that stinks, you know, I really don't like that. But the pressure of having to deal last minute with someone dropping out gives me an adrenaline rush. And I have to say, there's a certain part of me that, like, on 11 o'clock on a Friday, finding out that you're not going to be here Saturday, and I've got a 4-way team depending on you, and somehow I'm going to look at the schedule and figuring out how to rework it and talk to people and do whatever I can and show up Saturday morning and say, all right, guys, this is what happened and here's how I figured it out. You know, I like that. I like that.
Well, I bet it comes with a serious degree of satisfaction that you're able to solve that problem.
Yes. That's exactly it.
You have other people? I know, you know, Jeanette's very instrumental in making these things happen. Do you have her or other people that either can pick up some of that slack for the things that you don't like doing, you know, whether it's collecting money or the t-shirts, you know, where you can delegate those kind of things, or how does that work? You know,
I don't. I kind of do like pretty much all the administrative stuff. But that's not to say you know, so if every coach does a lot for their team or individual, so they're doing things like reaching out to their team and making sure that they understand, let's say, what slots do people want to fly, or do they want to say, what draw do they want to do, or what are their goals for the camp? Or if it's one-on-one, you know, again, what are your goals? What's your previous experience? You know, so there's a lot of that kind of work that each coach is doing. But the more other things, like I was saying, I'm doing all that. Could I have someone else do it? I could, but I don't. And also, to be fair, like I pay myself some for doing that.
Okay,
you know, out of the camp. So
which you should. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah.
Even with the fair amount of people that go through the camps or attend the camps, the churn and turnover rate in the top levels of competition skydiving doesn't seem to be very high to me. In general, once someone gets to a high level, they seem to stay in those positions for a good amount of time. Why do you think that is?
Why do I think that someone who kind of gets to the top kind of stays there for a while? Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think there's like a lot of aspects to that. I think one, it's very hard. So if you've put in all that work to be there, then, you don't want to be done right away. Right. So I think that kind of keeps you there. The thing that got you there keeps you there, right? That passion and then the reward of having now gotten to that level, I also wonder, to be fair, there's an extent to which people have gotten really, really, really good at something for which there's a market, whether it's coaching or even, from competition, there's something where I can apply it. And what else are you going to do? I mean, just straightforward, if I've spent the last 10 years of my life going in this direction, something's got to draw me, whether it's burnout is one way, or is there something even a lot more exciting? And some people do, right? Like a lot of people I know, particularly skydiving, are interested in aviation. So maybe they become pilots, and especially like cool, like helicopter pilots or something like that, So I think one, the thing that got them there keeps them there. And then two, there has to be something better that they feel they could move on to. And what is that,
Yeah, that's it's definitely food for thought. On the flip side of that, I wonder, I've seen a few people who have put in a tremendous amount of effort to get up to that level, or maybe get onto a top level team, and then have just stopped, I haven't had any conversations with anyone like that yet, but that interests me a little bit. It's like, why would you put in all this effort? And then, is it something that, didn't meet, your expectations or something like that? But to what degree of, in your coaching or coaching camps, do you try to groom someone that shows interest in getting to those higher level teams, and do you prepare them for, like, hey, this is going to be a lot of work? Is that something that maybe you have a conversation with someone about, or do you just kind of leave that up to the individual? How much, I guess what I'm asking is, how much do you play in helping prepare someone who might be interested in taking that course?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely talked with people over the years who have said that, this is something I want to do, and I try to be a mentor for that, and I think all my teammates do. And I think, the big thing I usually communicate is, look, like for a lot of those people, often they have the talent, right? They're seeing that, and then they're seeing like lots of gains. And usually I just try to tell them, like, look, you can be as good as you want to be. Like, you can be world class if you decide to put in that commitment. So now you just got to keep asking yourself, as you do more and more, is it worth it? Are you willing to do that? So I think I'm just encouraging people to examine the work side of it, and to ask themselves honestly if they're willing to do that, and to understand that better and better, and then to do that, I think that's the big thing that I try to, but I try to let people know also, when I feel like someone is there, like, hey, I see you, and I see you trying to do this, and I believe in you. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like because I know, I see you where you're at, and I know me and other people who have gotten quite far, and I know that I'm not any more talented than you. You know what I mean? That's the thing I try to say, somehow communicate. It's like, you're at least as talented as me, so you could at least go as far as I did, if you work as hard. Yeah.
And sometimes those, those words of encouragement can go a long way to helping to, further someone's success and their confidence in, attempting that.
Yeah.
What are some of your future coaching camps or events you're planning that you'd like to start spreading the word about?
Yeah, thank you. Well, we have one more workshop in May, which is getting pretty full. It's May 17th through 19th weekend at the Tunnel at Paraclete. Then we start our summer season, which is no more Tunnel until November. Then we do one every month from November through May generally, and sometimes it'll be more than one a month. So I like people kind of know about that, because I think that's really awesome, and I think it's sort of the wind tunnel is the most efficient way to just get better quickly.
For sure.
I tell people always, I say this, and I've never had people be disappointed where that you can show up Friday, and if you spend a good amount of time with us on that weekend, you will be years better skydiver on Sunday,
For sure.
in 3 days. And then know that I've never had someone say, hey, I know you told me that, Steve, but I didn't feel like that happened. Every time it's like, you've told me that and it was even better than I thought. So that for sure, I'd like people to know about. And they could find our schedule on rhythmskydiving.com. But then there's also a lot of jumping stuff we have. So I'll be at SDC, and my team will be, I know there's Doug, and he has this sort of all-American events, which is big way stuff. Chris Keith and Steve Lofek running other events, 8-way, 4-way, and different stuff through the summer. Summerfest is now already full. I don't think anyone else can register for that, but knowing about Summerfest for the future is just an awesome boogie in the middle of last week of July, usually at Skydive Chicago, is just tremendous. And we organize for free throughout that whole week. Invasion at the end of the year at Sebastian is another really great one that I don't think that's full yet. And then we do teams, like people to kind of know about teams we do. So again, for this season, we kind of have all our teams. I have a 4-way and an 8-way team that I'm actually jumping on, but we do both coaching of full teams. We do player coaching where we're on the team and jump with them. And sometimes we might get a fill in for national if it's say for 4-way, for 8-way, like I can be out, we're on that team. Or even people, they don't have a team, but they want us to help build a team and then coach that, so all those things. I think coming up soonest, look at rhythmskydiving.com or email me at steve@rhythmskydiving.com if you're interested in sort of events or team opportunities, especially at Skydive Chicago.
And just to reiterate what we were talking about earlier, as far as like it doesn't matter ability level, right? You could have almost no experience, or you can be a high level competitor that's looking to improve your skills.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the people just off their license. I love working with people like that. I in fact, that maybe you talk about what's most difficult. I'm frustrated by those who will say like, oh, well, let me get better before I come and work with you. Right. No, let me help you get better now quicker.
Yeah. You don't want to develop bad habits.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I want to be the first guy to sort of instruct you and really get you there quicker. Mm-hmm. And I like them. I like the newer people a lot, but then I also like more experienced people. And we have, whether it's 4-way or 8-way teams that are, winning advanced or even going into the open class, But for sure, like you said, there's no level that I don't want to work with.
I'd like to shift the topic a bit to something a bit more somber. Jeanette had some health challenges a few years ago, if I remember correctly. Would you be willing to talk about that situation and how you coped together with those challenges?
Yeah. So Jeanette, it was 2021, I guess. April 1st, 2021, when I was working out and she came in and she said, I'm not feeling good. I think maybe she had just thrown up already. And she went from, she told me she wasn't feeling good. Then I found her in the bathroom. She was on the floor and throwing up. And I looked at her eyes, and her eyes were doing something that's called nystagmus, which is, or nystagmus, but they shake left and right uncontrollably, super quickly, like in a way that you couldn't do it if you tried to, and I called actually another skydiver who knows a sort of, I think she's a nurse, Karen Lewis. And she was like, well, it's probably just maybe she's dehydrated or something, but you should get her to the OBGYN. So we drove the OBGYN. And they were like, immediately, like, we're in the waiting room and said, no, you got to go to the emergency room. This is, whatever this is, it's not good, So it went from like, I mean, honestly, the drive there was scary, especially her eyes, and she couldn't walk. So from the bathroom to the car, she, she put her hand on my shoulder and I led her there, Not only was it scary of itself, but she was like 30 weeks pregnant then, I think. Wow. Maybe 20 weeks pregnant. Anyway, she was quite pregnant. So there's the added question of like, is there something going on with the baby and what's wrong? And will whatever's going on hurt the baby as well, We went to the emergency room, and all the time I still was convinced it's nothing serious. It's just she somehow got dehydrated, And they then, we're going to do a CAT scan just to, what do you call it? Cancel out that, make sure that it's not an issue. They do the CAT scan, they come back and they say, we found something on Jeanette's brain and this is the issue. And we have to go, figure that out. And we can't handle that here. We need to go to Orlando. So we're going to helicopter over. So they helicoptered her from there to the hospital that night. And then I was driving there when Jeanette called me and said, hey, they told me that they're not going to let you in. So you got to come in the morning. So all that happened. Didn't really understand what was going on. And pretty quickly, within a day or two, we found out that it was something called a cavernoma, which is essentially this ball of blood vessels that could have been there all her life or could have formed in adolescence and been there. But regardless, the kind of thing that could have been there for decades. And somewhere in like in your 40s for many people, something happens that causes it to swell, and then they say leak, but essentially start bleeding out there. And that blood, as well as the growth, applies pressure in the brain. And obviously that's no good, right? Causes the damage. So this was, I know it's like near her brainstem. It was in cerebellum, which is like super basic brain processing stuff. It's like swallowing and breathing.
Basic motor functions.
Yeah. It's the kind of stuff like, okay, I can deal with losing a bit of math, but I need to swallow,
Yeah.
That's where it was. And at first, the local Orlando brain surgeon was like, look, if you weren't pregnant, we'd be operating on you in like Wednesday, and this is Sunday. And this was terrifying, but so not only that, but like, okay, so you're telling me that what we should be doing is brain surgery, but now the pregnancy is actually stopping us from what's best for Jeanette, and this balance of like, what's best for the baby, what's best and what is right? Is this doctor right? It was terrible. I went, and the way I always do is I went and spoke with like every person I could who I could access as an expert. I happen to have a really good pole vaulter friend who is a brain surgeon and who exactly does this kind of thing. And in fact, I didn't realize it. I didn't think about the fact that, but Jeanette, while in the emergency room, she said to me, are you thinking what I'm thinking? And I was like, what? And she said, we should call Matt Potts. And I was like, oh yeah. So we called him, probably 7 other doctors. I somehow got names of and spoke with all of them. And pretty quickly, I sent out these CAT scans, and within a day or two, or maybe MRIs as well, they did MRIs. There was a consensus that it was this thing, this cavernoma, because there was a certain amount of deciding, what is it? Is it a brain tumor? Is it cancer? And then what's best to do about it, which pretty quickly became like, do not operate. This is the kind of thing where it will 90% of cases never happen again. And you've got all these bad side effects, but you're going to recover to some extent, whatever it is, and you only do a surgery if it bleeds again. So that's where we were at. But for Jeanette, this was extremely difficult because she was at first, she couldn't have bright light. She couldn't walk. Everything was making her dizzy, vomiting, it was an untenable way to live, and she was saying, no, like we should do a surgery, like let's do the thing that fixes it, tomorrow. And to be told like, no, the thing to do is nothing, was just terrible for her and terrible for us. But that was it, and it was clearly the best way to go from the experts.
To do nothing until she had gone through the pregnancy? Or?
No, to do nothing unless it bled again.
Oh, okay.
So there were many levels of deciding. The very first thing, because when we had talked to the surgeon in Orlando, he wanted to operate. So he went from like, maybe we should do this in a few days, but how would we do it? To, okay, that's not realistic. To let's do it as soon as we can do a C-section and prematurely, take the baby. So we were at a point where we were talking with the OBGYN saying, how early is the least risk of injury to the baby that we can do a C-section and take the baby so that we can do the surgery as soon as possible. that was our next thing. So we had this idea for like a week or so that we were going to take Sage out by C-section, and maybe like, I don't remember, Jeanette remember better, but maybe like at 28 weeks or something like that. Something early, but not, too early. And we were looking at graphs and charts of like, here's the risk of brain damage, or here's the risk of heart problems or whatever, Later, as we spoke with more and more experts, they were like, absolutely not. You should bring the baby to full term. Yes, we think probably you should do a C-section in order to avoid Jeanette pushing because of what that could do for her brain. So what you do is take her out like a couple weeks prior to her due date. So we're pretty safely not going to have a labor, but the baby's, as that's fine. They're going to be fully developed then. So that's where we got to. So then it was like, and don't do surgery at all. Like at that point, if she gets to that point and she's continuing to feel better, then we think you should just see what happens. So that's where we got to. By the time we were having the baby, it was now don't do surgery. But it was many levels before we knew that. So I remember I was putting out on the blog, and actually, if I went back and read the blog, I remember better. But I remember it wasn't like we knew right away. It was, we need surgery. We need surgery, but we're going to wait 4 weeks. We need surgery, but we're going to wait 10 weeks. We need surgery, but we're going to let the baby come to term, but we're going to do surgery immediately after that. And then, we're not doing surgery, Anyway, so Jeanette got better and better. But, at first she's at a point where like literally she can't walk, where her physical therapy was standing in a corner and just trying to let go of the walls and not fall down.
Wow.
And like, just being in brighter light, in normal daylight. And the thing is not knowing if or to what extent any of that would get better, like it could be that was how she would be for the rest of her life, but it did. She continued to get better and better. And so all doctors were saying, let's do that, and probably, and I remember this. It's funny because some of this stuff I don't remember until I talk about it more, but we were in the summertime. And in the summertime, we still thought we were going to do surgery, I remember. And it was a matter of scheduling it. And we went to who we thought was the best doctor at the time. And she came and visited us and she said, don't do surgery. Yeah, because there were a couple of doctors who said, we can do this. Let's do surgery.
What are the alternatives to not doing surgery? Is it medication or the rehabilitation treatment?
Yeah,
physical
PT.
Rehabilitation? Okay.
Yeah, PT. And so, I forget, even in the summertime, we were considering a surgery, and we went to the person John Hopkins, the head of vascular surgery. So not only the neurosurgery, not only the head of neurosurgery at like the top, medical university of the world, but like the head of that kind of neurosurgery. We got connected with her and we visited her, and she said, don't do surgery. She said, I don't care what these other surgeons are telling you about what they're going to do or how they can make you better. Surgery will hurt you and make you worse. And the hurt that it does will be hurt that you can't recover from.
Wow.
Like right now you are still getting better. If you allow them to do surgery, they will make you worse and you won't get better from that. And I remember leaving and like we were both crying, hearing that, because we still thought that there was some chance of getting a surgery that would make her all better. And accepting that was that was maybe the hardest or one of the hardest days, because it was a moment where you're being told, you just have to accept this. So that happened. That was probably in June or so. Jeanette continued to get better. And, I remember we had this plan to go from January for a few months hiking. We had bought a trailer and we were going to go hiking through like Utah and Colorado area. And Jeanette was like, well, we can't do this anymore. And I was like, maybe we can, like, well, can we? And she's like, okay, yeah, well, maybe we can, the way we always are, like, well, why can't we? And what would it look like? And so she did. And she was doing these hikes, and it was hard, but she could, and she felt it, but she was getting better and better. And then we were planning to go to Iceland the next summer. This would have been 2022. And we were getting just a follow-up MRI before that to sort of say like, okay, everything's clear and it's continued to get better, just like we were hoping and expecting. There was a seed in my brain of like, there are moments when Jeanette's talking about symptoms getting worse that seem to have come up new. That was like January, So all of a sudden things from better and better and better did start to, like I don't remember her complaining of this as much, like stuff that she didn't even notice. You know what I mean? Like it seemed like this thing wasn't an issue a couple of months ago and now it's coming up more. Anyway, we have that May MRI, still thinking it just means it's just a check and we can go to Iceland. A week before, we get the results, and I remember Jeanette looked at the results, and she looks at the MRI itself before we got any feedback from the doctor, and she said, "This doesn't look good. I see that this has grown. This looks worse than the pictures I saw before. This isn't good." And then it did have a little description. It's not the doctor, but it's the person reading the MRI. You know what I mean? And what he said wasn't good, like things, just it obviously got worse. And is it cancer or something or whatever? So we were terrified again all of a sudden. Remember, we went out to dinner and we were like, but we didn't talk about it with the people at dinner with us, and we just sort of swallowed it. And the next morning we got a call from the brain surgeon at Johns Hopkins, and she said, change of plans. We got to do surgery and we got to do it right away. And this is the doctor who said, never do surgery. Wow. Surgery will only hurt you. You know what I mean? You're going to be irretrievably worse because of surgery. And now all of a sudden she's saying surgery is our only option.
That's a big shift.
Yeah. And we're like, what about this? And she said, well, if it bleeds again, it's going to continue to bleed again. And that's just going to continue to make worse. And we got to fix that, So we went and saw her, and she said, but the one thing is, I believe that the new blood created a pathway that will allow me to access this mass in a way that previously was not accessible, and which will allow me to do it in a less injurious way.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So in a way, the new bleed has made surgery possible,
right?
As well as required, So we said, okay. I mean, that was it, and everyone had said the same thing. If it bleeds again, you got to do it. So there was no question about that. So Jeanette we went up to Johns Hopkins. We had that surgery. And in fact, this is another thing. She has the surgery. I went with her in that morning to drop her off, and and I was coughing a bunch. This is now 2022, right? Yeah. So
just kind of past the peak of COVID stuff.
But still lots of COVID stuff going on.
Yeah.
And I drop her off. Jeanette says to me, I remember we're in the waiting room. She says, you should have a mask on right now. And I was like, I can't have COVID. I don't have COVID. And the only reason I was saying that was because I could not possibly accept that I had COVID at a moment that was so important not to have COVID. You know what I mean? Yeah. It was nothing intellectual. It was all heart, saying, no, I'm just willing myself to not have. And she's like, you're coughing a lot. and I got out. And my parents were there, as well as Jeanette's parents. And my mom said to me, you got to test yourself, So while Jeanette was in that first surgery, I went and took a COVID test, and I tested positive.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And then shortly after, every domino fell. We were staying in a house. There was Jeanette, me, Sage, Jeanette's parents, not in the same house, but my mom, my stepfather, my brother, all there. All but my stepfather got COVID, including Sage,
wow.
Who we took in the emergency room. So anyway, so I had found out I had COVID. I get a call from the surgeon that we were staying like a block away. So that's why I left the hospital to just be at the house and then come back when they detect me. So she texted me, the surgery's done. You can come visit. And I come back, and I said, I got COVID. What do I do? And she said, well, you can't come, you can't enter the hospital with COVID. And I'm like, everyone here has COVID, or might. I think at that point I didn't know it. But they're like, nobody can come, So Jeanette wakes up, and they tell her, like, the surgery went well, but your entire family has COVID and they can't come visit you, And there was the one thing she, of course, before I left, she was like, I'm just, you got to be there when I wake up. I want to see you when I wake up.
To have that support system is huge. When I had my hip replacement, it was just huge to have Jen there, and so I can only imagine how difficult that must have been not having her support system there with her.
Yeah. And we didn't know what the results of that brain surgery would be. Like, honestly, there's some risk of death is real, but some risk that, okay, it came out and they're going to say, you know what, you're paralyzed for the rest of your life. Or you know what, she's going to be on a tracheotomy tube, or whatever, to allow her to swallow for the rest of her life. You know what I mean? Like, we didn't know what that outcome was going to be of that first one. So to not have us there, like it was just, tough for her, but I mean, heartbreaking for me. You know, that was probably like the worst day of my life, you know? Then they're like, but you know what? Jeanette did wonderfully. And somehow, skip into the future, she did not get COVID. She's like the only one of that, which is insane. But anyway, they're like, she did great. So much better than we even expected. She's awake and she's alert and she's talking with us and everything is really good. We're just going to do an MRI to check. And they did an MRI and they said, well, you know what? We didn't get it all. And we think we should do a second surgery. But we're not doing that without your okay. And they said, and we said, okay, if you think so, then we want to
right
do that.
away or waiting?
Yeah, 2 days later. You know, I think it was a Thursday, and then I think we did a Saturday morning or something. Which, by the way, that Friday night was my birthday. Worst birthday ever. And it's side note. My family, I guess not all of them. Yeah, just me. I was the only one. What do you call it? Diagnosed with COVID yet, or whatever, testing positive with COVID yet, that moment. My family decides they're going to have a birthday cake for me. So I'm there. I'm in the kitchen. They're all in this like separate room. They get this cake, and I'm watching them from the other room, and they put all these candles out, and they light all the candles. And I look at them, and I said, what's your plan here? You know, am I going to blow out these candles and then you're all going to eat this? You know,
or do you have a designated representative? to do that for you?
Right. So that's what we did. You know, like someone else blew it out. You know, but anyway, that was kind of funny. But
COVID, definitely presented some unique situations in life that everybody had to deal with
that you never expected were going to come up, right? Yeah. So Jeanette had that second surgery, and then the thing was, she came out of that first surgery, and she was like, this is the worst pain I've ever been in. And they said that. They said there's going to be swelling in your brain, and it's extremely painful, and there's nothing we can do about it. And you're going to be extremely thirsty, but you can't drink anything, because if we need to do another surgery, you need to have an empty stomach and stuff like that. So they gave her what looked like a lollipop with like a little sponge on it that they would soak in water, and then she could basically stick that moist sponge in her mouth like once every couple hours even. Like that's what she had for an extremely dehydrated, extremely in pain person.
Just to satiate her. Was she hooked up to IV at the time? Was she getting IV fluids?
Yeah.
But it was just to satiate that
feeling of a need to drink
thirst,
something. Yeah. And so she's telling me, she's like, this is the worst pain I've ever been in. This is horrible. I can't even, it was like, I can't even talk. I'd ask her questions. She's like, I can't answer your questions. I'm just in pain. That was the first surgery. Then she comes out of the second surgery and she's like, I didn't know pain, and it's like still,
wow.
But she's like, this is so much worse than that, So it's funny because now she says she doesn't remember that. I remember that, you know what I mean? Which is good for her,
It's but she's made it. She seems to have made a almost full recovery. Like, just seeing her today when you guys came over here, to the house to do this, it's great to see her. And, she seems normal from an outsider's perspective, but I don't know if that's the case.
Yeah. So since the surgery was great, the second surgery got the rest of it, but it did cause damage that would once again need lots of recovery from not being able to even walk to being able to being able to see straight. But after sort of months and months and months, she's gotten better and better and better, and she continues to get slowly better. But there are symptoms and side effects that she probably will always have, and that she certainly remains having, But they're all things that you wouldn't know. I know, or if she tells you, but she's good enough. She can drive, intellectually, there's, no effect whatsoever. So, the normal person won't notice anything, but things like movement in her periphery is very, very sort of disturbing to her brain, having to stop and sort of even just knowing someone is sort of next to her, and that, it's just very uncomfortable. There's a lot of stuff related to that. And just at the end of any long day, her head starts to hurt more, and so there's just things, she gets tired more easily. She really needs sleep more than ever before, so there's just, it's just symptoms that are hard, genuinely hard every single day, but she just doesn't show because she's super tough and because it's, she's able to kind of work through.
She's resilient. it's been an incredible success story to have kind of watched that from the outside. And what I thought was a positive aspect about it was the skydiving community in general, and the people, the outpouring of support that you guys got. I thought that was extremely incredible, and it was cool. She got back in the tunnel, right? And she's done some flying, continues to do some flying.
She's done some tunnel coaching. She's been in a tunnel. She's done one. She did a tandem, and she's done one four-way since the surgery. She did a couple jumps even after being pregnant, but before the second bleed. But so she's done one four-way, and we're doing a team this year.
Oh, nice! I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Nice. It'll be lighter training for sure, but we'll go to nationals.
Oh,
and cool. She says she's jumping won't be the problem. It's more the stuff on the ground. Like I said, like sort of when things are busy, it's hard for her. But the actual jumping she could do.
Yeah, what an incredible success story. It makes me so happy that, things took that route. That's great. I'm super happy for you guys.
Thank you.
And I think it's great that you were able to finally do a couple trips, if I'm not mistaken, to Iceland. You've done a couple of those trips, and which I find fascinating. And after you guys were talking about it, then Jen and I went, and it's such an incredible trip. But for someone who's maybe, you have some tips or advice to offer for someone who's looking at doing a lengthy, multi-month trip like that to Iceland or a faraway place. I'd love for you to talk about your experience there, and more specifically, how do you gamify or strategize being able to economically sustain living in a foreign country for a matter of months?
Yeah, it's a good question. Those are two different things, right? So first of all, Iceland was really expensive. It just was. The food there, like it's hard to get a meal for under like $30, even at the cheaper places, right?
Yeah.
And hotels are super expensive, like many $100s a night. But what we would do is in Iceland, we rented a camper van. Did you guys do that too?
We did, yeah. We didn't stay there. We were only there for 10 days, and we drove around the whole place. But we did that, I think, because you guys had suggested it.
Yeah, so we were there for, I think, 12 weeks. We rented this camper van so one thing is we negotiated that with the camper. We were like, look, we're there for 12 weeks. What kind of deal can you? And it was awesome. They gave us probably like half of what the price would have been.
Wow.
Yeah. So that saved us a lot. And so now you're saving on hotel, although you pay every night at the campsites, but it's pretty cheap, right?
Yeah.
They actually, Iceland, so pro
Super
tip,
cheap,
they have a camper card, which can be really useful if you go to their campsites. So sort of maybe $200 for like all you can camp, So we did that. Doing a camper van. I think, if you're the kind of person who's going to Iceland, then you probably enjoy the outdoors, enjoy hiking, enjoy being outside a lot. So hopefully you're the kind of person who doesn't mind sort of, living in a camper van. You could go even cheaper and just rent a car and tent. We're not that hardcore, but that saved a lot, and also was really cool because it meant our hotel was where everyone wanted to be, and with Jeanette, we mapped out really, nearly every day, at least on a high level, of how, as we went around. The cool thing is we were also flexible. So we had heard that the volcano was going to erupt, and we were like, we're going back. So we went, we stopped where we were and headed back to where the volcano was. It was like probably a day drive, and we got to see a real volcano erupt. And of course, like us, we're not, that's crazy. Why'd you go up to a volcano? But we listened to the rangers. We stayed a safe distance, and we put ourselves in a place where we felt like, if they all said that this was safe, then we were comfortable with that,
Yeah, I was a little disappointed that there wasn't any active eruption going on when we were there, because I definitely would have liked to, gone up to see that, firsthand.
Yeah, it was tremendous, man. It's a once in a lifetime thing, right? To see a volcano. I don't know, will I ever get to see a volcano erupting? Oh, so cool. But the whole island, I think, is so tremendous and so varied, right? There's so many different cool things to see. Yeah,
that's what I tell people. When you're driving around there, sometimes you'll take a turn and you've gone from one, kind of ecosystem to another, and it almost looks like you're on a completely different planet. It's just incredible. Yeah,
absolutely different planet is a good way to put it. I would say if you only got a few days, then you should go around the southern edge. Like you could easily get within a few days to the east of the southern coast. And I would just go along there, see a bunch of waterfalls, cool glaciers. You can go up to like an iceberg, take a boat to a glacier, super cool. I would do that. If you have more like 10 to 14 days, then I would try to maybe do the full ring. I think that's really cool. And then if you have even more time, the thing that we appreciated this time that we hadn't done in the past is going a little bit more in the middle of the country. And you don't have to. So for those that don't know, there's like a great ring road that any car could go on. The middle of the country requires special cars that you would need to rent, like a really expensive, thing that's meant for off-roading essentially. Or the alternative is you could take a bus into the middle of the country.
Yeah, they have those buses with like the big all-terrain tires and stuff. They can drive through rivers.
Exactly.
And, really cool looking.
So this was our third time there, and this was the first time we did that, and we loved that.
Oh, cool.
And
that looks awesome.
Definitely, even for a day, I would say that is the first place I would go is probably this place called Torsmork. But there's this giant hike that a lot of people do if they do the big hike in the middle of the country. It's from I have trouble pronouncing it, but this place that starts with an L to Torsmork, and you can also go to the starting point of that hike. So that would be the first thing I would do is go to Torsmork if you can get into the middle of the country. The second thing would be to go to the other end of that same hike, and you could do that for a day. You could do a day, stay overnight, and then come back. But those were like unique and really beautiful places that even after having been there twice, I was so glad that we had tried.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. But yeah, we're definitely gonna have to go back and try that out because we stayed on the outer ring.
Yeah. Also, I really like the island. There's this island on the south called Westmannaeyjar or something. I mean, I can't pronounce anything right, but that was really cool. We also went to this little tiny island on the north, which is mainly cool because you get to be north of the Arctic Circle. Oh, right. They actually have this spot that they say like, this is the Arctic Circle. You're now hopping over it. And that was cool. Seeing the puffins, like if you're there time of year that they're puffins, they're just super cute, fun animals to see. Another pro tip. Okay. You're in Iceland during puffin time and you go to Westman Island, go see the puffins first thing in the morning. There's way more puffins. Okay. It's
a good pro tip. Yeah. I think the other part of that, so you talked about the like negotiating, a better rate. Is there anything else planning wise that you could offer to people that are looking to, making a trip like that? I presume that you weren't working. Like, did you save up money in advance for this, or were you doing some kind of remote working on the side to help to sustain that trip economically?
Yeah, no, we just had planned to, like, we're just taking a break where we're not really working, and I just try to load up on work before and after, you know what I mean? So I had a nice opportunity of having there was a player coach team, 8-way team that Keith worked with all summer, but he was going to do it. He couldn't jump with because he was doing a different 8-way team. So it was really nice. I got a sort of a weekend right when I came back to coach them and be the substitute player coach and then do nationals.
Replenish some of those funds. Nice. Awesome.
And like it's a tunnel camp leading right up to it. And so, yeah. Also, I forgot, we have our Airbnb. So that was making some money even while we were there, So, yeah. But otherwise, honestly, it was very expensive and for us unsustainable to do for very long. And we were just like, this is a once in a lifetime thing, and we're willing to, spend more than we can right now and make it up later.
Right. Yeah. You can't, you can't replace those kind of experiences. Yeah. And sometimes it's definitely worth it to, spend a bit extra to get those cool life experiences. Yeah. One more question on that. And I know that, I've already kept you for, 2.5 hours here, but, do you think that, that trip or trips like that have helped Jeanette to maybe recover a little bit quicker because of the novel experiences and maybe getting outside of the normal, or is it not something that you've really thought about or talked about?
Yeah. Well, I don't know about that specifically. I do think like being outdoor, there's a certain type of hike that she knows she's more comfortable with. It's interesting. Like if there's a wide path where it's not a lot of negotiating her foot where she's laying every foot, then steepness or not steep, she's very comfortable with it. So even if it's difficult for other people, that's not the issue. It's is it a narrow, loose gravel, worrying about where all the rocks are? That's really hard for her.
Okay.
If it's like I said, alternative, that's good. But that's something we're just aware of, for the hikes that we choose and what's good or isn't. the thing that is really good for her is scuba diving.
Really?
Yeah, and it's super weird, and we've talked about it with the doctors, and no one really understands why. But scuba diving, when she scuba dives, she feels no symptoms. It all goes away.
Wow.
And not only does it all go away, but it all goes away for often for a couple of hours, even when she surfaces. So we don't really, we have sort of some theories, but all of it, I don't really believe.
Man, that's
but for whatever reason, scuba diving is awesome for her. So we try to do a lot of that, in off time. So we go every December to the last 2 years. We're going to go again to Playa del Carmen and Cozumel area. And Jeanette scuba dives just as much as she can because she just feels better than she ever does.
Wow. I wonder if there's, applications where, doctors or scientists can study that kind of stuff for recovery for other, patients that have the same issues. Yeah. Or have gone through the same things. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation. I really enjoyed how our journeys and competition experiences have intertwined over the years, and I look forward to a lot more. And I just wanted to let you know, too, as a side note, that this is the 21st episode, and I've heard a statistic that once a podcast gets to 21 episodes, that it gets into the top 1% of all podcasts. A lot of people drop off or something. I don't know how true that is, but I just wanted to share that with you. And I appreciate you, being the 21st guest.
Yeah, cool.
Thank you so much, brother.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.